Welcome everyone. Glad to see you on my channel. Today I will tell you about an unusual story, an amazing story about companionship and love. I wish you a pleasant audience.
"Steve, where are you?" the wife shouted outside. "I'm here," she heard from somewhere deep in the yard. Alyssa walked down the path. She saw her husband standing with a shovel. She was surprised. It was too early to dig anything. When she walked over, she realized what was there. She smiled. Well, finally, she had been asking him to clean the cesspool for a long time. "Yo, do you know how much is in here?" Steve had a bandage on his face. "That's okay, but it'll be a decent toilet." She walked over to him and kissed him. The woman had wanted a restroom outside for a long time. There was one in the house too, but when a big company gathered outside, it was not comfortable to go indoors. And now she was glad that her husband had listened to her. Stiva looked out the window in the morning. The shovel was bothering her eyes, urging her to take it and work. He had long promised Alyssa that he would make the toilet clean, but he couldn't get his hands on it, and it was unpleasant. He gathered his thoughts, got up, and thought that today he would do everything. There was nowhere to put it off. He went out into the yard, took a tool of labor, and went to a small wooden structure. It took some huffing and puffing, but he got it sideways. Well, here we go. He put gloves on his hands and got to work. It was hard, but the man tried. When the job was half done, Steve decided to take the waste cart to the dump. He climbed out, looked at himself, wondered how he was going to get on, but then he waved goodbye and drove the cart down the path. He came back, jumped off again, and the work continued. Suddenly, the shovel bumped into something hard. Steve tried next to it, but it was there too. "The ground can't be so hard," he said to himself and poked the shovel further and harder, but nothing came out. Listen, come here," he shouted in the direction of the house. "What?" 5 minutes later, the woman was here. "Look," the man poked with the shovel in several places. A resounding thud could be heard. "What's in there?" She looked at her husband in surprise. "Treasure," he laughed. "You say that too," she smiled. "Okay, go, I'll get it. I'll call you." Steve sent his wife back. Still no help. The man started fumbling for the trim of what was here. It turned out the thing was not small. Steve huffed and puffed, tried, but could do nothing. Then he dropped everything and went into the summer shower. There he quickly stripped off a layer of dirt, put on another robe, and went after his neighbor. "Hi, Logan." He walked up to the fence and saw the man chopping wood. "Hey," he straightened up. "Come on, I need some help," he called out to him. "What have you got there again?" Logan didn't refuse, but he went reluctantly. "I was cleaning out the cesspool today, and I found something," he began to explain. "Treasure?" Just like Steve suggested the neighbor. "I don't know, but I told my wife the same thing." The man was cheerful. They went into the yard. "What a smell you have here," the neighbor grumbled. "Nothing, you'll get used to it." He led Logan to the hole. "Wow," Logan looked at the find. "You should change your clothes." The neighbor looked at him. He went to the barn and brought Logan some old clothes. When he had changed his clothes, the work continued. But the two of them couldn't get anything out. The box, or whatever it was, wouldn't budge. "I'll go get Lucas." Logan looked at his neighbor. "Yeah, just take off your clothes," Steve warned him. "I'm just going to the fence." He didn't want to waste time. He was already interested in what could be there. Sergi came to the rescue very quickly. He was already in his work clothes. Logan warned him. "The three of us worked together." They managed to shovel a little bit, and friends with crowbars picked it up. Now all that was left was to get everything upstairs. The neighbors were all muddy and their hands were slipping, but they were getting closer to the goal. When the big box was on the ground, the men looked at the find, and each began to sketch out ideas of what it might be. "It looks like a coffin," said one. Saying either, it was getting scary. "All right, showers are over there. You go ahead, and I'll do the work here," Steva commanded them. He went to the fence, took off the hose, untwisted it, hooked it to the water. The strong jet immediately began to wash away the dirt and everything else. The further the box became clean. Stiva became convinced of his friend's words. It was indeed a coffin, but not a simple one, but a zinc one. When the friends returned, they opened their mouths. They stood there stunned and stared at the find. "Is it like that?" Logan asked. As you can see, Steve didn't know what to do or say next. He also went to take a shower like the others. Work was definitely over for the day. Steve called out to his wife. When she came out to look, she opped and crouched down. "Steve, that's it," she spoke softly, her voice shaking. "Can't you see?" He walked over to her. "I can see, but how? Where from?" Allison cried. Steve and Allison had long dreamed of buying an apartment. They were very picky. The couple had met recently. Both had marriage under their belt, children, but there was no love. They sought each other, and there was an instant spark between them. "Allison, are you in love?" her friend asked her when they met again. "You have no idea." The woman looked at Leslie in shock. "Where did you fall in love?" The woman didn't understand. "I will tell. You will not believe," smiled modestly Allison. Leslie sat back down and picked up her wine glass. They had a certain day to meet. Then the girlfriends put aside all their business and went to the countryside, where Leslie had a small cottage. All day long they'd just sit and drink wine and talk. "You know me, I never spend money for nothing," began her story Allison. "What's that got to do with it?" My friend was surprised. "And that day everything was going wrong for me. I was going to work in the morning. I put on my tights, and I noticed an arrow on the way out. I looked at my shoes. I couldn't even wear them without tights, and I was upset." Allison sat down in the chair across from me. "So you went to the store and met him?" Leslie was trying to guess. "No, no, 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 no." She put on her old sandals, which were comfortable without pantyhose, and hurried to work. Of course she was late. There was no other way, she sipped from her glass. So what? She couldn't wait for Leslie's climax. The day went on as usual. At the end of the work day, I turned everything off and left the office. When I went down the stairs, I caught my heel on something and flew down. Leslie at that moment groaned and made big eyes. "And he caught you?" Again she interjected. "Either you're listening or I'm not telling." Allison took offense. "Come on," she straightened her back. When she got to her feet, she realized there was a slight sprain. There was no heel on the sandal, so I sat down on these unfortunate steps. "And then he appeared, the prince on a white horse, and saved you?" Ira was getting sarcastic. "All right, I see you have your own stories and you're not interested in mine." Allison got up and went to get some snacks. "Come on," her friend followed her. "No offense, you just tell everything in such detail." She caught up and hugged Allison. They walked back in, sitting back down in their seats. I'm sitting there crying. I don't know how to go home. I see a cab waiting nearby. I'm glad. But then I realize it's going to cost a lot of money. She raised a finger. "So that's what frugality is all about," she smiled. "Yes," Allison agreed, and the driver saw it, and he got out of the car and came toward me. "I'm telling you, a prince," Leslie laughed. "Okay, so be it." Allison didn't argue with her. "What happened next?" she said, waiting for her friend to continue. "He came over and asked me what I could do to help. I showed him my swollen foot and heel, and he smiled. Then he helped me up and led me to the car. I didn't resist. We got in the car. Steve started talking to me. I was sitting there, and his talk gave me goosebumps." Allison blushed and looked at her friend. "Really? You felt it right away?" Leslie wasn't laughing now. "He admitted later that he had something like that," Allison said. "Wow, did you invite him over?" My friend was curious. "I wanted to, but I was shy. We got to my house, and I got out, and I couldn't stand on my feet. So he ran out, gave me his hand. I leaned on him. The perfume I smelled made me almost faint. Steve took me to my apartment and looked at me, but I couldn't understand what he wanted. They laughed later about the fact that he was waiting for payment," laughed Allison. "God, that's so Donaldic." Leslie stood up and added wine to the glasses. "I didn't dare ask him out. I thought we'd never meet again," she chided herself. "And the next day I got ready for work, stretched my leg, put on comfortable shoes, went out, and he is standing at the entrance." The woman blushed again. "He came for money," guessed her friend. "I thought so too, and he came out, invited me into the car, opened the door. I said I'd walk, but Steve insisted. He said it was a gesture of help, no payment." Allison was silent for a second, remembering something. "That's how you two met," Leslie concluded instead. "You could say that." After that, he came to pick me up in the evening, and then I was no longer shy. I told him to come up. I'll buy you tea. That's where we met at the table and got to know each other properly. Now together, while we communicate, but he calls to move to him. She put a glass on the table. How interesting, and they say there are no coincidences. Leslie was silent. After sitting down, Alyson told her friend to come and visit her. She would introduce her to Steve. Leslie couldn't miss such an opportunity, so she agreed to come. They agreed on what day it would happen and went home. Steve was warned about the meetings with her friend, so he did not bother with calls and questions. When Alyson was already home, she dialed him herself. Hi, she still felt awkward. It's young people getting to know each other, going out, texting, and they're doing the same. I've been waiting for your call, he said in his beautiful voice. Come over, she called him every time, because she didn't want to meet on his turf. I'll be there soon. He hung up and Alyson started cooking. Steve arrived as promised. Their evenings passed monotonously. First, they would sit at the table, drinking tea or wine. Then they'd go to a room, watch a movie, talk, but it never went any further. And one day, Stava came to see Alyson. Why are you all dressed up? She didn't understand. Leslie was supposed to visit them today. Can't I wear a suit? He couldn't understand. Are you getting ready to meet my friend? The woman smiled. You could say that. I want to look at the highest level, Stiva admitted. Good, she'll be here soon. Alyson knew Leslie was never late, and indeed, at exactly 7 p.m., the bell rang. The landlady opened the doors. Her girlfriend stood on the doorstep. Hi, she handed her a bottle of champagne and a box of chocolates. Come on in. Alyson led her through the door. Leslie walked into the kitchen. There was a handsome man sitting at the table. She smiled at him and said hello. Alyson's been telling me about you, he told her. And what did she tell you about me? Leslie smiled and looked at her friend. Nothing bad, only good. Stiva offered the woman a chair to sit on. This evening was a little more fun than usual. Leslie was telling different stories that she and Alyson had going on. And then, when her husband left her, she got to this point. Please don't, then, put her hand on hers. Okay, I'm sorry, please don't. Leslie stopped talking. Did your divorce with him go badly somehow? Steve asked. In principle, everything is fine, but I do not really want to remember these moments, especially in front of you. She raised her eyes to the man. Okay, you do not want, so we will not. Stava was ready to do everything to make only this woman was happy. Afterward, they went to see Leslie off, and on the way back, Stiva suggested sitting down on a bench. Why, let's go home, Alyson asked him. Wait, he waited until she sat down. Then he pulled something out of his breast pocket, got down on one knee, and handed the woman a ring. Steve, are you sure? Alyson had been self-conscious about her age all along. More than ever, he told her, took her face in his palms, and kissed her on the lips. It made her feel so happy that everything trembled inside. They went home happy. Will you stay? Alyson asked her boyfriend for the first time. If you let me, I'll stay, he told her honestly. That evening they got serious. Alyson knew she would give the man a positive answer. She sat in front of the mirror and looked at herself. Yes, 45, but not old yet. She began to smooth her face. She had to break the news to her children, and Alyson was afraid of how they would react. Her son Austin had long ago graduated from college, now lived and worked in another city, and had recently started a family. Her daughter was also enrolled and pleased her mother with her grades. Alyson called first her son and then her daughter, inviting them to visit. The daughter was due this weekend, and the son said he'd be there too. That's when she'd introduce everyone and talk about getting married. Steve, don't you want to invite your kids? She called him the next day. They won't go, he said with certainty. Why do you think so? The woman was surprised. Their mother decides everything for them. His voice was sad. Well, don't be sad, she wished him and hung up. Everything was fine. The brother and sister met on Saturday. The mother was dressed up. Mom, what's going on? Olga was the first to arrive. In the evening, you'll find out she was laughing. She was happy. Since their father left, the children have never seen her like that. What secrets? Julia went into the room. Austin entered the apartment. Oh, it smells good. He sniffed the air with his nose. Hi, Alyson came out to him. Wow, he gave a thumbs up in admiration. Trying hard, the mother hugged her son. After that, a friend came. She knew that Alyson would introduce Steve to the children, but about the proposal was a complete surprise. "Who are we waiting for? Let's go to the table, because I'm very hungry," said the young man. "Let's wait a minute," his mother asked. She kept looking at her watch. "And who are we waiting for?" He asked everyone who was here. "Where's your wife?" His mother changed the subject. "She has no time, something about work, the daughter with her mother-in-law." He immediately answered all the questions. Good. Just as she said that, the doorbell rang. Alyson got up from her seat, her cheeks flaming. She walked over and opened it. A man entered the apartment. "Meet Steve. This is Steve." She introduced him to the kids. Julia stepped out to him, the girl. Austin shook the young man's hand. "I am very pleased to meet the children of my favorite woman." Steva was gallant. "And now we can go to the table," said Alyson cheerfully. And they all walked together into the hall. "You haven't said a word for so long, have you? It's obvious that you are not the first day together." The son looked at his mother and put a pie on his plate. "I'm sorry, but I felt a little uncomfortable, embarrassed or something. And yesterday Steve proposed to me," and she raised her hand with the ring, deciding there was no more time. "Mommy, congratulations. Uncle Steve's a great choice." Her daughter came up to her. "I'm telling her the same thing," said Leslie. "When's the wedding?" my son asked. "I don't know. We haven't been anywhere yet, but if everything goes well, it'll be in a month." The woman gibbered and looked at Steve. Yes, he was in agreement with his wife to be on everything. They sat, talking. Who was talking about what? The children stayed at their mother's and Steve needed to go home. He called Leslie for a ride. She didn't refuse. "See you later, love." He kissed Steve's hand. "Bye, darling," she smiled. "Mom, you're lucky." She and her daughter sat in the kitchen. "I don't understand how this could have happened," the woman replied. "Does he have children?" Austin joined them. "Yes, but they don't communicate," Alyson told them. "Too bad," shook his head. After everyone had learned the truth, Alyson announced the upcoming wedding at work. She herself didn't understand why she was so embarrassed when she talked about it. She hadn't taken anyone away from her family. She hadn't cheated on anyone. What was there to be ashamed of? "Alyson, we congratulate you." The co-workers cheered, as did everyone else. "You deserve this happiness." They hugged her. "I invite you all to the wedding," she prostrated. "We will definitely come," agreed those. Steva and Alyson applied, just as the woman had said. They were given a date in a month. Now everything had to be thought out and prepared. Steve did everything his future wife asked him to do. He went shopping, to the restaurant, to the atelier, because he realized that the woman already had a lot of problems. Everything was ready. The guests were gathered. It was the happiest day in the life of Alyson and Steve. They were married. Now they had to decide where they would live. Tamara's apartment was small, but it was close to her work and the center. Steve's apartment was bigger, but it would be harder to get to. So far, they had settled on the first option. The woman was comfortable here. Everything was her own. No need to get used to anything. "And let's sell our apartments and buy one large and spacious," suggested the husband to his wife. Why, it was a good offer. She had never even thought of such a thing. Realtors called several times a day, wanted to show options, but the spouses were not satisfied with a lot of things. "Old house far away, plumbing doesn't work, and other things." "You're so picky, as if you don't want us to buy something," Steve told her in the evening. "You know it's true. I don't want an apartment. Let's buy a house in the country," she suggested to him. "What about work?" He didn't understand her. "Yes, it will be far away, but nature, sauna and everything else," she said dreamily. "Well, let's see the options." Steva immediately dialed the realtor and said that their plans had changed. By the time Alyson had found the cabin, the man's apartment had already been sold. He now had enough money to buy the house. "You wanted to sell mine too, didn't you?" Alyson wondered. "Let there be at least some housing in the city," her husband told her judiciously. "That's right too. Olga will come there," she agreed with him. Now Steva and Alyson drove through the villages and looked at the options that had been offered to them. "This house has been empty for a long time," the specialist told them. "I like it," said Alyson. She walked inside, looked outside. Everything she wanted: bathhouse, vegetable garden, outbuildings, "We'll take it." It took you so long to decide on an apartment, and you bought the house on the click. Was surprised by the young man who offered them all this. I guess I just wanted it more than a concrete box, Alyson admitted. If everything is perfect, we can do the paperwork, the realtor said. We're in, the couple said in unison. Alyson took a vacation at work, wanted to do everything quickly, to move in now. The first thing the woman did was to get acquainted with the neighbors. She went first to one, then to another. A week later, a housewarming party was celebrated in their yard. Of course, the house was not ready to move in yet, but she wanted to make people happy. I think you'll be fine here, said Selena, who was Logan's wife. We hope so, Alyson was sure. First, Steve put up the walls, then the roof. The neighbors helped when they had time. And today it was down to the cesspool, and there it was. Alyson couldn't get away from what she saw. She looked at her husband with big eyes. Should we open it up? He asked. Do you think the genie will come out of there? Logan teased him. Yeah, bad idea. The man shook his head. He finished his work for the day, putting the wooden box back in place. Threw a tarp over what they found so as not to scare anyone. We should go see the old-timers, see if they know anything, Alyson suggested tonight. Tomorrow, I think everyone will know about this case and someone will find it, Steve said. They went to bed, but neither could sleep, both of them thinking about the terrible discovery. What else have you thought of? The man asked his wife. He wanted to get away from the sorrowful thoughts. We should bury it, said Alyson. Yes, but first to find out what was going on, he realized. As Steve had anticipated, the next day everyone knew what he had found in the cesspool. But whoever Alyson asked about the former tenants, they just said, no, I don't know. I know there was a big family that lived here, said Selena, the neighbor. She and Logan, like Steve and Alyson, had just moved in. The police should be called, Logan was sure. Yeah, they'd definitely look into it, Steve agreed. He didn't wait for other advice, dialed a number and called the police. The police arrived, and they were told everything, in some places even interjecting. You didn't open it? The officer asked. Of course not, Alyson's eyes bulged. The coffin had been removed, taken away for identification and other matters. Alyson had seen it all. She had asked her husband to go into town for a few days to get away from the horror she had experienced the day before. Okay, as usual, he gave a positive answer. They drove to Alyson's apartment, talking the whole way about how it could have been someone's son or husband. The only thing that was unclear was how he ended up where Steve had found him. I'll tell you what, we'll probably live here until things clear up, he said to his wife, who didn't mind. Are you going to go there? Alyson asked him. Yes, I'll go tomorrow and see if I can find someone else, he said, while he was thinking about something. Good, then I'll get on with work and other things. Alyson didn't even want to think about it. Steve, as promised in the morning, got ready and went to the place where they had already settled down. He went straight to Logan's house. They first sat him down at the table to have breakfast. How is it here? Is it quiet? Asked the guest to the host. Nothing, said the friend. Interesting. Steve pressed his lips together. You know, I was thinking there are still people here. They live there, far beyond the village. They say there are old people. Maybe you can ask around. Logan suggested him. Great idea. I didn't even know where to start. Steve got up and went to the door. If you need help, just whistle, Logan told him in his back. As always, Steve looked around and walked out of the house. He circled the country roads for a long time, couldn't find anyone. But when he saw the houses in the distance, he got excited. And when he drove up, he realized he'd done it prematurely. Almost all of them were shriveled and leaning, as if no one had been here for years. Hey, what are you looking for? He saw a little grandmother. Hello, I wanted to know something about the village. He pointed in the direction. What's interesting there? She was mumbling. We recently moved in. We were renovating and then we found something. I'd like to know about the people who lived there before us. Steve talked on and on. Let's go. She beckoned him into the yard beyond the gate. Thank you. He followed the old woman. They entered the gates, which were shriveled from time. Steve looked around. It was obvious that nothing had been done here for a long time. There were huge, unsawed logs all over the yard. Maybe you need some firewood. The man asked the old woman. If you want to, so stay, she said indifferently. And the man took the cleaver. He took off his jacket and got to work. When there was enough firewood, in Steve's opinion, he finished and went into the house, where the grandmother had long since disappeared. That's enough for now, he sat down on a chair. Who's going to wash your hands? She told him sternly. Well, where? He looked. There was no wash basin anywhere. There, behind the stove, she pointed to the curtain. The man got up, washed his face, and went back to his seat. Grandmother moved very nimbly about her kitchen. She put milk and bread on the table and pulled a cast iron with potatoes from the stove. Thank you. He couldn't wait to start eating. What's your name? A woman came to the bench and sat down. Steve, he said in an open and friendly way. And I'm Georgia. Grandma took a spoon. Thank you and pleasant. He started to eat too. After work, it was straightforward to feel hungry. So what did you want to know there? Georgia asked. You probably don't know. We stopped by a house that had been empty for a long time, and there were these. The man stopped talking. You mean them? She asked. I don't even know. He looked at her surprised. Don't look. I used to live in that village too. I was their neighbor. She stood up, went to the sideboard and pulled out the photos. What are these? He took the pictures she held out to him. This is the family you're talking about. She pointed her finger at a card. I don't know. I didn't notice Steve's house at first. There were 3 people standing in the photo, husband and wife, and Grandma Georgia, of course, she was younger then. And then the man saw that they were standing near the very house where he and Allison now lived. Did you get a good look at it? Grandma smiled. Yes, this is the house where we live now, or rather, we are going to. He put the picture on the table. Oh, those people had a hard fate. Who would have thought it when 2 young and healthy people came to the village? She shook her head. Do you know their story? Vanya was very interested in it. How not to know? They were like children to me, the old woman marveled. Will you tell me? He fixed his eyes on her. It's a long and sad story. It seemed that Georgia was about to cry. Of course, I have to go to town to see my wife, but I want to get to the bottom of it, he assured her. So be it. I'll tell you what happened to them. She got up, washed her hands, wiped the corners of her mouth with the handkerchief. Then she came again and sat down on the bench, put her feet up so she was comfortable, and looked at Steve. The village was prosperous then. We had everything. We worked, lived, enjoyed every day. The only thing was that the collective farm was short of hands. We wanted young people to come. But the young people at that time did not care about the village. They tried to manage somehow on their own. And then, what a joy! 2 young men arrived at once, Trevor and Katie. He's an agronomist and she's a medic. We welcomed them like honored guests. They were given a cottage, the same one you live in now. The boys were unmarried, so for about 2 years we talked them into getting married. Finally, they did, and Trevor proposed to Katie. Oh, how fun it was then. The whole village went out, beer, kvass, wine, flowed by the river. And the snacks were unprecedented. The old lady was silent, probably imagining how they had partied. And what happened then? To be honest, Steve was not very interested in the biography of young people. He wanted to get to the heart of the matter, but he was afraid to tell the woman about his find in case she got sick. I was their neighbor at that time. Every day they came to visit me. Then we had tea. Then with Katie made cakes for Trevor. They were soulful people. She stood up and walked over to the table to pour herself some tea. Why were they? Are they gone now? Steve asked. I don't know about that. She sipped her tea. After what happened to them, they didn't live long, and then they left, and I never saw them again. Grandma brushed away an invisible tear with her handkerchief. What happened to them? I wanted to find out quickly and go home. It's bad. The old lady shook her head. Kathy, are you sure you want to live in the village? You're so young. A young man asked her. If they sent me from the institute, then I have to go, she assured him. Well, Trevor and Katie met when they were students. She was in medical school and he was in agricultural school. They graduated, and when Trevor found out that Katie was sent to work in the countryside, he asked to go there himself. But now, when the time came, he regretted his choice. No, he still loved Kathy, but he didn't want to live in the village all his life. Why don't we work for a few years and then leave? He asked her. Well, after a few years we'll see, she told him. As soon as the chairman learned that 2 young people were coming to him, he immediately allocated them a house. The girl and the young man quickly settled there, whitewashed the walls and painted the floors. They were sociable, so everyone in the village knew and loved them. Aunt Georgia, Katie called her neighbor. "What do you want?" She turned around. "Come and visit me. I baked a pie," she called her. She was happy to come, and they sat at the table, chatting and drinking tea. At some point, the whole village began to persuade them to get married, but Kathy said that she was still young and it was too early. And after 6 months, the girl felt that she was not alone. She told her husband about it. There was nowhere to go. The wedding was going to take place anyway. Gully Valley heard to the glory and began a simple life of two people who lived together. Oh, kicking. Katie sat on the couch. Then her husband would lie on her belly and listen. "It's like there's not just one baby in there, but a whole team," he would say as he felt kicks through her belly. "You know, I feel like there's more than one baby in there too," Katie confirmed his words. "What did the doctor say?" he asked her. "Who says what?" she said. It wasn't very complicated. Katie was pregnant, and when she had to give birth, she had invited her Aunt Georgia and another one, who was a medic. She went to the nurse's station where she worked. "Why are you here?" Georgia asked her when she got there. "I don't want to go to town. It's far away and no one close to you will come to you," the girl said. "Okay, as you know, we'll deliver the baby. We've done it more than once," the woman assured her. "Okay, I'll give you a hint if anything." Katie was so small and her belly was climbing up to her forehead. When it started, the women scooted in. Katie breathed. She knew how to do it right. "Push," shouted Georgia, and the girl started. Time passed very slowly. The pain was unbearable. Finally, the head came out, and then the rest of the body. There, a woman lifted the baby in her arms, a boy. The second woman took it from Georgia. Katie had no time to rejoice, but the pain came again. "What's that?" The neighbor was frightened. The second one, Katie exhaled. Oh my God, it was starting again. After a few minutes and the second little boy was in the woman's arms. "You knew? Why didn't you tell me?" Georgia threatened with her finger. "It's okay," was the exhausted girl. The babies were bathed and placed next to their mother. "What are you going to name them?" The one who had just delivered the babies was delighted. "Anthony and Donald." Katie lay back and looked at her babies. Anthony was mobile. He was roaring and active. Donald, on the other hand, lay motionless. "What's wrong with him?" Kathy asked. "That's for you to tell me." Georgia shook her head. She wanted to get up, but Katie couldn't do it. When it all came out, it turned out that the boy had been born disabled. He was just like his brother, except that he developed differently. Katie cried a lot. Trevor supported her in everything. But there was nothing to do. She would never leave the baby. From the day they were home, all her time was devoted to Donald. Of course, Anthony wasn't without his mother's love either, but he could do a lot on his own. "You take such good care of them," Trevor often said. "They're my little blood." The mother held her sons in her arms. "Let me help." Her husband never said no when his help was needed. Kathy would give Anthony to her husband, and she would sit with Donald. The boys were growing up. Anthony was already walking, and Donald was still sitting on his mother's lap. She went to hospitals, went to witch doctors, took the child to the witch doctor, all to no avail. "I'm going to work, hang in there." The husband kissed his wife and left. It was hard, but Katie coped with everything. Georgia helped her. When it was necessary to go to work, the girl could not. She wrote a letter of resignation. She had a disabled son in her arms. It was sad. People started coming to her house for her to see them and treat them if needed. "Anthony, stop it," yelled the mother to her son as he molested his brother. "Why him?" the boy pouted. Often the boy had to stand in the corner for hurting his brother. Katie worked with her son. She gave him massages and medication. By the time it was time to go to kindergarten, Donald could already move a little independently. The mother rejoiced at her son's first successes. She did not give up, took him to doctors, practiced herself. "Anthony, get ready for kindergarten," his mother told him. She had already dressed Donald and was waiting for her second son. "Why do you always dress him and not me?" The boy took offense. "Let me help you." She put Donald in the stroller and went over to her son. After that, they would go to the garden. Donald would babble something in the stroller. After one son went to the garden, Kathy felt better. She had more time at home. She did the laundry, ironed, took care of Donald, did the housework. Everyone who knew her in the village often came and helped her, some with clothes, food, some even gave her money. Katie refused, but they shoved her down. "How was your day today?" Trevor would ask in the evening. He came when the whole family was already gathered. It was fine. The girl would get up and kiss her husband. By the time the boys reached school age, the mother decided to put Donald in the first grade. He could walk. His head was working properly. She invested so much effort in the boy that she hoped for understanding of the leadership of the educational institution. "Let's see how he will behave, how other children will accept him," did not refuse her. Trevor, Donald got into the first grade. She rejoiced in the evening. "Are you sure he'll do well?" Her husband doubted. "In knowledge, I have pulled him up. He is not inferior to ordinary children." She was surprised at Trevor's distrust. Anthony and Donald walked to their first call on their own feet. Katie was only a little supportive of her son. How worried she had been when they first left for lessons. All day long, she sat wondering how her boys were doing. Had they fought? Had they had a fight? "Mom," Anthony came running into the house. "Where's Donald?" She looked behind him. "He'll be here in a minute. He's a cripple," laughed his brother. "What are you talking about? And where did you hear that word?" Mom was angry. If the parents needed to go somewhere or to work in the garden, they left the boys with Georgia, who didn't mind. "Who's going to school?" A neighbor came in the evening. "We did," the boys shouted with glee. They all sat down together at the table and ate the delicious pie the woman brought. "Thank you, you always help us out," Katie told her. And the woman saw how hard it was for her. She hadn't started a family herself, and now it was too late. Georgia loved Kathy like a daughter, and her children were her grandchildren. Trevor worked, the children grew up, and now it seemed that the family was restored. By winter, Kathy decided to go out to work. The residents rejoiced because they had never found anyone. There was one doctor who came from out of town, but he only lasted 6 months. "If you need anything, you ask for it right away. Don't be shy," the neighbor told her. "It's a must," the girl thanked her. Trevor often came to the neighbor's house after work. She'd buy him tea, and he'd cry on her shoulder. "What is it this time?" The woman sat down at the table, on which there were candies and gingerbread. "Nothing." "Katie is pitiful." He took a sip of tea. "What's there to feel sorry for? Look how well she did. She got the boy back on his feet." Georgia understood him, but she shouldn't be like him. "I can't stand to see her doing all this. And then she comes into the bedroom and drops dead," Trevor said. She'd come up to him and stroke his head. It was often like that. Katie knew Trevor went there, but she didn't say anything because she knew he was tired too. The man worked 2 jobs to make money for the family. "Kathy, why don't we go to the seaside and have a vacation?" He suggested it one day. "Now the boys are on vacation, we'll definitely go." She knew it would be very good for Donald. And as soon as the boys finished first grade, they bought train tickets. "Mom, it's so nice here," sat Donald on the sand. "Yes, son." She looked up and saw Trevor and Anthony splashing in the water. Here, the couple had a chance to spend some quality time together. "Did you get some rest?" Trevor asked her when they had gone to bed. "Yes, thank you, sweetheart." She kissed his shoulder. Everyone went home in a positive mood. There was a great mood. Nobody forgot about the neighbor. They brought her some shells and beautiful stones from the sea. "Well, how?" She was already waiting for them at the gate of their house. "Fine," smiled the family. Anthony was pestering his brother again. "Calm down," the mother threatened them with her finger. Within a day, she was already out at work. Georgia was with the boys now. A month passed. Kathy sat in her office. Grandpa Frank came in to see her. "What's troubling you?" She got up from her chair. Abruptly dizzy, Kathy fainted. "Daughter, what's wrong with you?" Bent over her grandfather bent over her. She opened her eyes and smiled. Grandpa Frank gave her the same smile. "I guess I'll be going." He got to his feet and walked toward the exit. Katie didn't stick around either. She was in a hurry to get home. "What are you doing here?" Georgia was surprised that she had come so early. "I think we're going to have another family member soon," Kathy said excitedly. "Oh, really?" the neighbor said excitedly. They sat down at the table, poured tea, and waited for Trevor to come home from work. When he came, the women told him everything. It was very happy news. By the end of the summer, it was clear that Katie was not wrong. She was really expecting a child. "It's a girl," Georgia told her. "How do you know?" Katie turned to her. "Look, what a lifeline," laughed the neighbor. Kathy was feeling bad now. She was nauseous all the time. It was hard to go to work, but she kept going. Her fellow villagers felt sorry for her again. During her pregnancy, the girl had lost a lot of weight. She looked sickly. What if she was sick again? She shared her fears with her neighbor. "Do not think about it ahead of time," she advised. Trevor became more attentive to his wife. The boys realized that the mother is difficult. They tried not to bother her with their arguments, behaved quietly. Anthony and Donald were in the 2nd grade. Now that his mother was lying at home, Donald had a hard time. He did not understand much in his studies, and the woman could not help. Trevor tried his best, but he couldn't keep up with all these tasks either. "Stop shouting, you see, Mom is not well." Sometimes he broke down into a shout. He understood that it was hard for Katie to hear and see it. The labor started suddenly. It wasn't due yet. It scared Katie even more. She woke Trevor. He quickly ran to get Georgia. Now it was just the two of them. Trevor took the boys into the other room. No one was sleeping that night. "It hurt," moaned Katie. "Oh, girl, you should go to the hospital," worried the neighbor. The child was walking forward. "We'll get through this," Katie said. Georgia had delivered babies, but she didn't have that much experience. She twirled her belly. Finally, Katie stopped her. "It's starting," she shouted so loudly that Donald in the next room flinched and clung to his brother. No one was keeping track of time, but as it began to get light outside the window, a baby's cries echoed through the house. "Well, thank God," Trevor exhaled and hugged the children. "Daughter," Georgia came out of the room. She was so tired, as if she had not delivered a baby and unloaded coal. "How are you?" The man looked into the room. "Good." His wife nodded to him. He walked over and looked at his princess and smiled. After that, Katie began to blossom. She and her daughter, who was named Fiona, took her sons to school together, started helping Donald with his studies again. Trevor saw that his wife was healthy. It was visible to the naked eye. The boys continued to study. When they were in the 5th grade, Fiona went to kindergarten, and the mother went to work. From that point on, no one worried about anyone. "How's Donald doing?" Patients who came to see Kathy would ask. "You know, the bigger he gets, the less you can see of his handicap," she answered and smiled. "That's great." They thanked and left happy locals. Kathy was happy. Fiona made her happier every day. But the boys, that's another matter. "What have you done again?" She had to deal with them tonight. "Nothing." "Why are they calling him names?" Anthony said. He always stood up for his brother so that, God forbid, he would not be beaten up or do something worse. "I understand all that, but we need to be careful." She pretended to be angry with them. "We're sorry." The brothers apologized as best they could. Katie didn't expect anything bad to happen, so she forgave and kissed her blood. When Fiona had to go to 1st grade, the boys were already in 8th grade. That's where the trouble started. Anthony got mixed up with a bad crowd, started doing all sorts of naughty things. And most importantly, he dragged his brother along with him. "What's that smell?" Mom asked me at night. "Mom, we're adults," Anthony told her. She could see that Donald was not feeling well. He was standing and swaying. "Son, what's the matter with you?" Kathy was frightened. "I need to lie down," the man said. And then all night long the woman didn't sleep. Not only did she have to help her daughter do her homework, she had to run after her sons. And in the morning she had to go to work. "Trevor, talk to them," she begged her husband. "I can only whip them." He clenched his fists. "Why go to extremes?" Katie didn't understand. "You and your good nature will only make things worse," he told his wife. "I'm asking for your help." Kathy began to cry. "All right, I'll talk to you tomorrow," he promised. Katie hoped so. And then something happened that made her mother feel so bad that she had to go to the hospital. The boys were 15 years old, and that night they were out for a long time. At first, the parents were not worried. Their sons could sometimes stay out late. But when it was 2 in the morning, the mother and father were not on a joke frightened. Katie went outside. She went and knocked on George's door. She, though asleep, got dressed and went outside. "Shall we walk around the village?" the woman asked her. "Shall we split up?" The neighbor suggested it. No, together first. Katie disagreed. They walked on, knocking on every house with a light on, but there were no boys anywhere. They reached the end of the village where the quarry was. They saw a fire burning in the distance. That way, Katie said. They rushed toward where the light was flickering. Donald was lying by the fire, dead drunk. Son, Kathy began to cry. That's all he could say. Can you get up? She tried to get him up, but she couldn't do it. Katie looked at Georgia, who came over, and together they managed to get the boy to his feet. A hand on his shoulder, Katie showed her neighbor. They were weaving some because the guy, who was completely relaxed, was hanging onto them. Presently, they put Donald on a bench a few houses away. She ran, went inside. Trevor, she called to her husband in a whisper. What they found him. He also spoke because the daughter was already asleep. Help please, he's sitting on the bench, Georgia, and I just can't carry him already. It's very heavy, she whispered to him, and she was very nervous. Okay, wait, just don't worry. He put something on his feet and ran out of the house. Trevor easily threw the guy on his shoulder and carried him to the house. Put him on the couch. He's drunk. He turned away from his son. That's right. And where's Anthony? The mother sat down next to Donald and cried. Why are you crying? They have their own head on their shoulders. Trevor was getting nervous. I know they have a head on their shoulders, but how old are they? Katie continued to cry. If he's not back by morning, we'll report him, the man said unequivocally. By morning, when Donald woke up, the first thing he did was ask for water. Where's Anthony? Kathy bent over him. Anthony remembered what had happened yesterday. Anthony, your brother. His mom was standing next to him. Listen, yesterday we met the townspeople. They came to visit us in the village and asked us to take them somewhere where they could make a fire. So we took them to the quarry, and they took bottles out of a bag and started serving them. I don't remember, but I think Anthony went off with them, Donald said. What are you talking about? Kathy ran around the room. She didn't know what to do. What townies? Where did they go? How many of them were there? She began to gather herself. Where are you going? Trevor came out to her. To the precinct, she said. We need to do something. Anthony had left with the townspeople. She was already outside the gate when she saw her son. He was walking. His pants and shirt were torn. His face was bruised. My God, my son, where have you been? What happened to you? She ran up to him. Ma, I need to lie down, he told her practically in syllables. She took him inside and put him on the couch. Is Donald here? That's all he asked. Here, how did you get here? She screamed and cried. Fiona came into the room. She looked at the brothers and could not understand what had happened to them. A few days later, a private man came to their house. Trevor himself was very surprised at his visit. He let the man into the kitchen and they sat down at the table. Is Anthony home? The man in the uniform asked then. Yes, I'll get him right away. He entered the room. After that, the policeman told everything. A few days ago, your son robbed the store with other boys, the policeman said. That can't be. Katie jumped up from her stool. All the evidence is against him, the cop insisted. What do we do now? The woman didn't understand. Pay the fine and it's all over at once, or I have to take him away, the man said. Okay, we will pay everything, exhaled the woman. She did not understand how from such a boy, which he grew up, could grow up such a bully. Anthony had gotten away with it, but he had gotten the worst of it at home from his father. If you ever lay a hand on another man's property again, you'll know what prison is, a man told him. I get it. The boy didn't look at his father. You know he can't drink. Why don't you keep an eye on it? Katie wondered. Mom, I got it. You could see that the guy was hurt and offended. After that, the boys quieted down a bit. Donald spent most of his time at home and Anthony was always doing something. His mother wouldn't get out of the principal's office, but nothing else happened. After this incident, Kathy began to feel sick, dizzy all the time. No pills helped. But she wouldn't go to the hospital because she was afraid of what they'd say. Katie, what if it gets worse? Georgia admonished her. Thank you for your concern, but I can manage on my own, the woman replied in the same way to everyone. She was tutoring her daughter and trying to counsel the boys. What are we going to wear to the prom? The boys asked their mother. Let's buy you suits, Mom suggested. Good, they cheered. Anthony wanted to go to the city after graduation and work there. Donald didn't know what he wanted to do. His mother couldn't insist, so she just gave advice. "Why do you need to go to the city? What do you want there?" She cried in the evenings. "Everything is possible there now. Earn to live well," her son told her. "And you?" She turned to Donald. "What about me? I'll stay with you. I'll help you." He shrugged his shoulders. "What a fool." His brother laughed at him. "He's a fool himself." He turned and took a swing at his brother. Katie got so tired of all the arguments that she just walked away. One day she had a seizure and was taken to the hospital. "What did you get out of it?" the father asked his sons. "We'll apologize later," Donald said. "Don't let it be too late," sighed the father and left. Katie was fine. She was on a drip, took all the pills she needed, and came home as soon as she felt better. "Forgive us, Mom." Donald came up to her. She'd hugged him and stood like that for a long time. Fiona had been a quiet and calm girl all these years. She had done well at school, no complaints from her teachers. Lately, she had become interested in socializing with her brothers. "What do you find so interesting with them?" her mother once asked her. "I don't know," just shrugged the girl. "Just don't go anywhere with them," the woman asked her. "Why not?" She didn't understand. "Because she's too young." Her mother hugged and kissed her. She didn't have any problems with Fiona at all. She thought to herself, Anthony, just as he'd said he was going to go to the city, was going to do just that. He was getting ready. Graduation was just around the corner. Donald, on the other hand, was more at home. He was studying for his exams. Fiona, hi, her brother's friends came up to her. Hi, she looked at them. She liked them. Shall we go for a walk with us? The girls called out to her. Of course, she was sure she had nothing to be afraid of with grown-up girls. Where are your brothers? The new friends asked. As it turned out later, they specifically came to the girl to find out from her everything about Anthony and Donald, but where she was then to understand it. I don't know, out walking somewhere, the girl shrugged. Off they went. First, they were just in the village, and then they went beyond it as well. There was a forest ahead. Fiona walked up to one girl and took her hand. Scared, laughed the girl. A little, she was only 9 years old. Don't be afraid. Everything will be fine. They had already entered where the big trees grew. They usually gather at the edge of the forest, one of the girls said. They'd started to make their way into the deep. I want to go home. Fiona looked at the girls. No, we'll find the boys now and then we'll all go together. I'm tired. Fiona began to moan. Don't moan, one of her friends told her. They walked out into the clearing. Someone was there. Voices could be heard. Hello everyone, came Betty, the bravest of them all. Oh, the girls are here. A strange young man turned around. And who are you? The girl looked perplexed. And I'm just who you need. He started to get up from the ground. His buddy started to do the same. Now our guys are coming here. They will show you, said Betty defiantly. And who are we? He was looming over her. The other girls stood a little further away. They didn't know what to do. Fuck you. Turned around and walked towards her friends. What? Her boyfriend grabbed her by the hair. Let go, she shouted. The girls went to her friend's rescue. Fiona saw all this. She was scared. She couldn't move. The girl shrieked and ran wherever she was going. At that moment, a terrible thing was happening in the clearing. The one who took the girl by the hair piled her on the ground and went under her skirt. When the others tried to stop him from doing it, the other one came up to them. Hey, what do you want there? He said defiantly and pushed them away. Let her go, almost crying, Catherine said. Aha, found fools. The comrade grabbed one that was closer. Ah, screamed throughout the forest the girl. Anthony and Donald at this moment appeared in the clearing, and with them another 5 friends. Who are you? What do you want? Grabbed the guy who was already lying on Betty. He quickly stood up and grabbed him by the chest. The other girl was freed too. They ran away, and a fight broke out between the guys. They fought to the death. One of the strangers pulled out a knife. Donald, his brother shouted, but it was too late. He was stabbed in the side. The boys all pounced on the assailants, and when it was over, Donald was unconscious on the ground, and the attackers had fled into the woods. Cowards, Anthony looked at them. He tried to lift his brother, but he couldn't do it. Is he breathing? The boys asked. I think so. The boy listened to his breathing and felt his brother's pulse. At this time, the girls, who were in shock, ran to the village. They didn't know where Fiona was, so they wanted to check if she was home or not. When they were already at the gate, they didn't dare to knock or enter. What if she's not there? Catherine looked with frightened eyes. Why did we drag her there in the first place? Began to repent Betty. At this moment from the conversation heard Katie. She came out of the house. What happened to you girls? She could see that everyone was scared. Aunt Kathy, forgive us. The girls began to cry. What are you saying? The woman felt her head start to hurt. Fiona, Catherine stopped talking. What Fiona? Where is she? Her hands began to shake and twitch. We do not know. We thought she ran home, sobbed the girl. Jesus came back into the house, threw on a scarf and put on Katie's shoes. What happened? Trevor came out to her. Fiona is missing, began to cry woman. Quick, we need to look for her. He got ready too. All together, including Georgia, they rushed towards the woods. They didn't go a few meters when they saw Anthony and company. They were carrying someone in their arms. Donald. His mother fell to her knees in front of him. Mom, those scumbags stabbed him, Anthony said quickly. What's going on? She looked up at her son. He needs to go to the hospital, said someone from behind. Quick, to the nurse's station, the mother commanded. The boys dragged him there. Katie turned his sweater back, looked. The wound wasn't big, but it was serious. She did as she had been taught. Donald was in serious condition, needed to go to the hospital. An ambulance was called. They needed to look for Fiona. She was in the same woods as the bandits. Will you stay with him? The mother asked her son. No, let's go with us. The friend suggested. The guys would be more useful in the forest. Okay, the group headed back to the place they had just returned from. Fiona was nowhere to be found. No matter how much her mother and the boys shouted, no one answered them. Oh my God, where is my daughter? Crouched down on her knees and began to sob Katie. Her head was hurting worse and worse. It felt like it was about to split in two. Mom, go home. We're on our own here. Anthony pleaded with her. You've already done everything yourself. She couldn't calm down. The search continued into the night, but there were no results. We need to go home, eat and change, Trevor said calmly. How can you say that when your daughter is missing? She screamed. Good, then we need to get a bigger group together, he understood. And just like his wife, he wanted to cry. Fiona, screamed the mother at the top of her voice. But again there was silence in response. Katie, calm down, she's probably really scared and hiding. Her husband took her by the shoulder. Leave me alone, everyone, the mother shouted again. Her husband lifted her up and carried her home. She grimaced and scratched, but he tolerated it. The boys gathered more people and went to comb the woods. When Katie had taken a sedative, she went to the nurse's station, but there was no one there. Donald had been taken away in an ambulance. Trevor, please let's go to the woods. She sat on the couch and cried. Now when the guys come back, we'll replace them. He showed her there were still a few people waiting outside. Okay, put her head down in her arms, his wife. Time passed and Fiona was still nowhere to be found. Morning came. Everyone was exhausted, but there was nothing they could do. Let's go. Trevor took his wife's hand. They searched every corner of the forest, but the girl was nowhere to be found. What did we do? Was she dead? Katie asked. Horrible images came to mind, but the woman didn't want to think about it. It couldn't be. Her husband cradled her in his arms. The search continued. The boys were screaming, looking under bushes and trees. Trevor dragged his wife home again. She felt sick. She was passing out. She needed to rest. What about you? She looked at her husband. And me back. He pointed to the woods. Good. She collapsed exhaustedly onto the bed. Katie lay staring at the ceiling. She couldn't imagine what would happen to her if her daughter was gone. What if those scumbags caught her and abused her? She covered her eyes with her hands again and started crying hard. Don't, approached her Georgia, who had just entered the house. No, she screamed. There the girls came, who were taking Donald to the hospital. The woman tried to speak softly so as not to make things worse. Where is he? What's wrong with him? She jumped out of bed. He's in the hospital. His organs have been hit. Her neighbor took her hand. I have to be with him. She snuggled into Georgia's shoulder and sobbed. Yes, of course, we'll find Fiona and go, she told her. Will we find her? Katie didn't believe it anymore. We will, the woman was sure of it. They packed up and went into the woods. Georgia had packed a large bag of provisions to feed those who were in the woods. No, Katie approached her husband. Woman, to the operating room. Take the girl for a checkup, the doctor said. Trevor and Anthony stayed in the hallway. Anthony was in the intensive care unit. There was no way to get to him, so they just had to wait. Your girl is all right, a little dehydration, but it is not terrible, the doctor brought her. What about your wife? Trevor wanted to know. It's more complicated, suspected stroke. He was not in the operating room, so he didn't know exactly. We'll wait, the man said. Maybe Fiona and I can go home, the guy asked. Okay, the father replied sadly. How much time passed? No one knew. Finally, a doctor came out of the door of the operating room. Tell me, what's wrong with my wife? Trevor ran up to him. Stroke. He lowered his eyes. The operation was successful, but the results will be later. Trevor sat down on the couch again. He saw his wife being taken to the emergency room. Her head was bandaged. The man covered his eyes with the palms of his hands and cried. Now it was necessary to wait for her to come to her senses. It is not worth sitting here. Everyone is very tired. Go home, rest, and tomorrow, closer to the evening, be here, the nurse asked him. What if she wakes up and I'm not here? The man asked. No, she didn't confirm his fears. Then Trevor thought that there were children at home who were also unwell, packed up and drove there. He was very nervous. He had to hold on. As if someone had jinxed you, Georgia told him, who had already fed Fiona and put her to bed. Don't say that, Trevor agreed, even though he didn't believe it. They sat in the kitchen and were silent, for there was nothing to say. I'm going to town, Anthony said. Why? His father didn't understand. I'm fine, Donald squeezed himself out. Mom's awake, she's fine, he told his brother. He just nodded back. Anthony stood still and went to the dormitory where he lived. On the way, he wondered why all this was happening to them, but he couldn't think of anything to say. Where do you disappear all day long? His friend asked him. My brother and mom are in the hospital here, he answered truthfully. I see, you are good that you do not leave them, praised his neighbor. After that, nothing was usual. Anthony went to the hospital every day. He helped his mother to get up. They took a little walk. Then he would go to his mother. She needed to be fed. He took care of her as best he could. Sometimes his father and Fiona came. They too did everything they could to get their relatives healed and home soon. Finally, the doctor said they could both be taken away. Only Donald mustn't do anything heavy and Kathy mustn't worry or it would be worse than it is now. Kathy, Trevor, Donald and Fiona drove back to the village and Anthony stayed behind to study. Nothing could be done. Her husband sat down next to her. All right, we must, so we must, she said and stood up. Donald was getting very upset about this. No, not because his brother was going into the army, but because they wouldn't take him there. Why, yes, he's a little sick, but he went to school with everyone else, did everything together, and now, like going to war, so Anthony did and he didn't. The day came when they had to gather their friends. The weather was beautiful outside, so they decided to gather outside. Tables were set out, which Georgia along with Katie set up. The guys came over, each wishing something for their friend. That's it, enough with the admonishment. Anthony was tired of it. He had just recently met a girl. He wanted so much to confess his feelings, but he kept silent, thinking that he would come back. Then everything would start to spin. Son, right? His mother told him. Of course, he promised. The parties lasted till the night. The friends did not want to leave. The girls were crying. Trevor watched it all from the gate. He didn't realize how time had passed so quickly. Not long ago, his children had been little. They didn't bring any trouble. Katie was normal. And now, one son is leaving to serve. His wife is not well with her head. What is this, old age? Dad, what are you standing there for? Anthony called out to him. I'm coming. He broke away from the pole and sat down with everyone at the table. It's late, boys. It's getting late. We should split up. His mother saw that Donald wasn't himself again. Tomorrow, I'll wait for everyone at the station, shouted Anthony. At night, the boy couldn't sleep. He heard that it was scary where he was going. Different thoughts came into his head. "Son, wake up." His mom woke him up in the morning. "Yeah, now." He opened his eyes. Katie was preparing his bag for the road. Trevor was supervising the process. Anthony washed up, dressed, and ready to go to the station. Hey, the girls were already there. Friends were pulling up. Anthony climbed into the cabin. One of the guys went with him to walk him straight to the station. "And you and me." The girls got into the seats too. "Goodbye. Take care of yourself. Hug your son, mother." "Good luck." Shook his father's hand. He held back tears. "Goodbye, everyone. Do not remember and write." For the last time, waved the guy from the bus window. They drove on. Everyone was silent. The guy looked out the window as if he wanted to memorize how beautiful it was here. Tears stood in his eyes, but it could not be shown to anyone. The son left. The mother sat at home at the table. She did not understand how she would survive parting with him. "Shall we go to George's?" Her husband came up to her. "Let's go." She stood up. The neighbor was always happy to see them. She set the table as she usually did, and they sat down to talk. "How's your health?" the woman asked Katie. "I'm fine," Kathy shrugged. But her husband and Georgia noticed that she was starting to act a little differently. "Good." They didn't bring it up again. After a brief sit-down, the husband and wife went home. Kathy sat back in her seat at the table. For some reason lately, it was the one she had been occupying, and she could sit there for hours. "Where are Donald and Fiona?" She turned to her husband. "I don't know. Out somewhere," Trevor shrugged. "I'm worried about her. Why is she always walking with him?" The woman spoke her concerns. "On the other hand, it's a good thing." Trevor tried to reassure her. They heard some rumbling outside the window. "What's that?" Katie looked out. "I don't know. Can't you see it?" her husband asked her. Not yet. The woman remembered what Donald had told her about the motorcycle. She got up from her seat. "Let's go." Trevor took her hand. They went outside the gate just as Donald pulled up there on his motorcycle, Fiona sitting behind. "Did you buy it after all?" The man was examining the iron horse. "Yes, I can ride it around the village now," the boy said proudly. "Oh, son, be careful." His mother came up to him. "It's all right," he hugged her. "Where are you going?" She looked at her daughter. "Mom, why can't I go?" Fiona resented not being allowed to socialize with her brother. "Okay, just please be careful." She kissed the girl. The motorcycle started again and the young people sped off into the distance. "What do you think?" She looked up at her husband. "I don't know," he shrugged. Time passed. Anthony wrote letters. His father, when he received them at the post office, read them to his wife first. He was just afraid that his son would write something exciting and Kathy would immediately feel bad. "Look, another letter." He came home. The woman smiled. She waited every day to hear from her son. Her husband would read it aloud, omitting some details, and then they would write a reply together. One day that dreaded letter arrived. Anthony wrote that he was going to a hot spot. His father didn't understand why he had made that decision, but there was nothing he could do. Naturally, he didn't say anything to Kathy. He himself first wrote a reply with his wife, and then from himself. "I'll go to the post office and mail it." He showed her the envelope. "Good," she nodded and smiled. Trevor decided not to tell Donald about his brother either, so he wouldn't blab. On the way back, he stopped by George's. "Hey, why are you alone?" she wondered. Needing to talk, he sat down at the table. "Okay, what's up?" She sat down too. "Anthony texted, says he's going to a hot spot." The woman was the only person he told about it. "Oh, really?" She put her hand over her mouth. "I don't understand it myself." Kathy didn't say anything, and you don't say anything. He pressed a finger to his lips. Of course, she nodded. They sat for a while longer, discussed the latest news, and Trevor went home. "Father, Anthony's friends are calling us to go for a ride," Donald shouted from a distance. "Are you sure you can handle it?" Dad got worried. "Surely you've seen me ride." "Just Ace?" He cocked his head. "Fiona, why don't you stay home?" The man insisted. No, it'll be so interesting." She took a firmer hold of her brother. "Okay, just don't tell Mom later," Trevor whispered. The boys left, and he went into the house. "Who were you talking to?" Katie was sitting in her seat. "Let's go to bed," he called his wife. "It's so early." She looked at her watch. "It's okay." He took her hand and led her to the bedroom. They lay down, talked for a long time, and soon fell asleep. Donald and Fiona met the boys at the edge of the village. Only 4 of them had motorcycles. They were going to go to the track and compete. "Who's first?" one of the boys asked. "Me," Donald raised his hand. "Good, then I'll go with you," the friends chimed in. "Dibs on me," Fiona asked her brother. No, it's gonna be really fast," he told her off. The boys got off the gas and started off, running parallel to each other. Donald won because he was really going fast. "Oh, you're good," said the one he was competing with and shook his hand. "I can't," Donald shook his rival's hand. Then one pair and the other took turns riding. Each time someone won, and then the winners competed. There were only 2 left, the ones who rode the fastest. Donald was one of them. "Cheer," he shouted to his friends. Everyone hooted, and the boys got on their horses and rode into the wind. "Donald, you did well," one of the girls ran up to him. Fiona stood aside, resentful of her brother. Bringing her here and not paying attention, she turned away from everyone. "Sis, what's wrong?" Her brother came up to her. "Nothing, not even once did not take me for a ride with the wind on the asphalt, all around the village. In the village, she did not turn around." "Sit down, now I'll roll," like an honorary circle of the winner. He looked back. The friends were already parting. "Really?" She looked at him. Sure enough, he went to his bike, got on it. Fiona nestled in the back. She'd hugged her brother tightly as before. "Where are you going?" The other friends were surprised. "I'm taking my little sister for a ride," he waved at them. He accelerated, said something to Fiona, and they sped down the asphalt. Now there were no bumps or bumps. Everything was smooth. Not a few seconds after they pulled away, a KMAZ showed up ahead. The friends saw Donald start to wiggle. What happened to him? Perhaps startled by the big oncoming car, probably he wanted to turn around. A bang, a thud, and a scream, and then silence. Over there. After a little stupor, those who were watching all this shouted. The boys rushed in, but there was nothing they could do. Donald was lying in an unnatural pose on the road, Fiona in the other direction on the grass. "The girl's still alive," shouted the KMA's driver. He radioed for an ambulance. The ambulance had to wait for some time. Fiona was alive. She was very badly bruised, but she was breathing, unlike her brother. Trevor and Katie had long been asleep when the windows and the door began to bang. "Who is it?" The man woke up. He went to the door, opened it, and there was a bunch of people almost knocking him off his feet. "Uncle Trevor, Donald, Fiona." They shouted at each other. "Calm down, will you explain what happened?" He looked up with dazed eyes. Donald had crashed. Fiona was alive. She was in hospital. At that moment, the wife appeared on the doorstep, and as soon as she heard that, she fainted. "Get out," Trevor shouted at the young people. "Katie," he ran to his wife. He lifted her in his arms and put her on the sofa and went to get someone to look after his wife while he was away, calling for Georgia. "What again?" He woke her up too. "They say Donald crashed his motorcycle with Fiona," he said quietly. "What?" The neighbor's eyes bulged. "I don't know what's wrong with them, but Katie heard it all, and she's not feeling well now." He rushed her. When Georgia left for Trevor and Katie's house, Trevor ran to the village hall to make a call. The ambulance didn't arrive quickly. Katie never recovered. She was taken away. Trevor went with her. At the hospital, he reliably learned that his son was no longer alive and his daughter was in intensive care, in extremely serious condition. He had not been told anything about his wife yet. Trevor was sitting in the corridor. He was crying. The doctor came and sat down next to him. "I think your wife has gotten worse, but she's holding on. Maybe she doesn't believe it yet," he said. "Yeah," Trevor shook his head. "You can pick her up tomorrow morning. Here are the pills. Give them to her at the funeral." The doctor handed Trevor a packet. "Thank you." He didn't know what else to say. "I hope everything will be okay." The medic got up and walked down the hall. Trevor slept right there in the hallway on the couch. In the morning, he walked in on Katie. She was looking at him with eyes that were so scary. "Where's Donald?" She asked him in the voice she used to speak to him before his illness. In the morgue, her husband didn't lie. Why him?" she cried. Trevor unsealed the packet and gave it to his wife. She obediently drank the pill. "And Fiona?" She couldn't hold back the tears. She's in the hospital. She's doing fine. Her husband lied. They spent some more time in the hospital and then took their son's body and drove to the village. After the pills the doctor had given Trevor, Katie was generally immobile. She was doing something, but she was like a doll. No emotion, nothing at all. The funeral was quiet. The mother sat by her son's coffin and cried. Everyone felt sorry for her. Georgia didn't understand how she hadn't gone mad herself. This had happened. "We need to go to the hospital, to Fiona," Trevor said to the neighbor when everything settled down. "Yeah, you go and I'll stay with Katie," she told him. Trevor did his best, but Fiona had outlived her brother by only 8 days. He sat and cried and didn't know what to do. Then the man made a strong-willed decision. He took his daughter's body, arranged for cremation, paid the money. He drove to the village with a small vessel containing Fiona's ashes. It he had dug up for his son in the cemetery. "Back already?" Georgia asked him. "Yes, I have good news for you," said the man, making a happy face. "And what's that?" Kathy, when she wasn't taking pills, was adequate. "Fiona has been taken to the clinic to recover there," he smiled. "That's good. Let the girl get better," Katie said. "Do they send children without their parents?" Georgia questioned. "She's not a child. She's 12 years old." Trevor put his finger to her lips to keep her quiet. "Then I see," nodded the neighbor. She didn't know the truth yet. They all sat together. The father's heart was breaking with grief, and he couldn't even speak. In the evening, when he went to see the neighbor off, he told her everything. She looked at him with big eyes. "Trevor, where have you been?" Katie looked at him. She wasn't the same. "Out in the yard," he told her. And a month later, the thing that everyone had been dreading happened. Trevor was at work. A man came up to him. He said there was a mailman waiting for him outside. "What?" He came out. "I'm sorry." He put a telegram in his hands. His son was being taken to the motherland in a zinc coffin. "No." He fell to his knees, then got up and caught up with the man. "Please don't tell anyone. My wife will go crazy if she finds out," he begged him. "I'm not supposed to," the man replied. "What is it?" A comrade came up to him. "Nothing." He folded up the paper and put it in his pocket. Georgia, grief, he ran into her house without even knocking. "What again?" She was no longer surprised. "Anthony." Trevor couldn't get any further. "No way." She looked out the window. "Tomorrow I'll go to town for the body," he said. She supported him in everything. She said she'd do whatever he said. Trevor drove into town, arranged a car, said he needed to move building materials, wanted to make an outbuilding in the village. We agreed on a price. He came to the military enlistment office. There he was offered that the funeral would be at the expense of the state with a guard of honor, but the man refused. "You see, I have such a situation," he told them. "He wants to bury his son quietly." "Well, that's your business," the man in uniform told him. He threw a tarp over the coffin, told the driver that he had loaded everything, and they drove off. "Why at night?" The man behind the wheel didn't understand. "It just happened," Trevor shrugged. They arrived at his house. The streets were deserted, and only Georgia stood at her gate watching to make sure no one went in. 2 local backwoodsmen were prepared to help the man. They sprang out of the back alley and dragged the coffin over to the fence. Here, Georgia gave them some more. "That's it. Thanks. Go inside." He waved her off. He cleaned the toilet and shoved the coffin into the cesspool. It didn't sink, so Trevor had to dig it even deeper. By morning, he was exhausted, but he was done. The toilet was still there, nothing inside. "Yo, you smell?" Katie said when he came back to her. "I don't know." He pretended to sniff his hands. "We've got to get the bath heated." His wife got up and went into the kitchen. Trevor did as she wanted. They washed up and came back into the house. "Do you know why Anthony doesn't write for so long, and there are no letters from Fiona?" Katie asked her husband. "He'll definitely come tomorrow," Trevor said. He realized that this was his puncture. When Kathy was busy, he would sit in the other room and write. Then he'd go outside and pretend to get something out of a drawer. And then he and his wife would read together. "Oh, Trevor, what have we done? A mother should know everything about her children," Georgia told him. "I'll take her away from here," the man said. The two of them lived together, but Trevor started drinking because he couldn't bear it all. At some point, he couldn't take it anymore, went to the barn and hanged himself there. And in the morning, When Katie couldn't find him, she went out into the yard and the barn doors were open. She looked in and passed out. I noticed it late when she was on the ground, and I ran out and there was this picture, Georgia said. Wow, the story. Steve was sitting there looking at her. We took Katie to the hospital and buried Trevor. She herself left there to live here so there wouldn't be too many questions, she cried with tears already visible. Where is Kathy now? Steve asked her. She was in the clinic for a couple of months, and then she was transferred to a specialized center, the old lady answered. I see there was a family and then there wasn't. Steve shook his head. He looked out the window. It was getting light. He realized he'd been here all night. Okay, I'm going to go. He got up. I'm not afraid to die now. She looked at the man. Come on, you'll live a long time. He shook her hand and left. He decided to get home on foot. It would be time to think it over. He walked along the road and could not imagine how such a fate could be for people. It was impossible in his head. He reached home in the village quickly. In an hour there was a bus to the city. He wanted to take it. I went to the station, bought a ticket and went. Allison, it's me, he shouted from the doorstep. What are you doing up so early? She rolled over onto her other side. But when her husband began to tell her what he'd learned tonight, she was wide awake. She sat up in bed and blinked. What do you think? He asked her. We should call the police and give the guy a proper burial, she said. I was thinking the same thing, looked at Steve's watch. The husband and wife had been out of the house since morning. They were in a hurry to get to the station. Hello, we're here about the coffin that was found in the sinkhole, said Steve to the officer on duty. Come on in, he pointed them in the right direction. They went into the investigator's office and told him everything they knew. He sat there, his face growing more and more drawn out. Do you believe it? He asked. Well, how not to believe if all the evidence is in the face? Now it was Steve's turn to be surprised. All the documents were filled out. They agreed that the motorcade would be organized. They also agreed on the time. What now? Steve and Allison came out of the department. I want to find Kathy. The man looked at his wife. Oh, where do we start? She didn't understand. The hospital. He caught the car and they drove off. Hello, I'd like to find out any information about Kathy. He approached the front desk. Right away, the girl started poking around on the computer. Yes, here, who are you? She stared at the couple. I'm a brother, stepbrother, the man added. Okay, she told them what clinic she was in. Steve and Allison drove to the mental health clinic. They walked up to the gate. They had to fill out a bunch of paperwork to get in. They were greeted by the doctor. Steve explained to him that he had not seen his sister for a long time. She had disappeared somewhere, but now he found her. The doctor understood him, turned and showed him the direction. She always sits by the window, reading something on paper, the doctor said. Okay, thank you. They went that way, where the man directed them. Kathy was indeed sitting by the window. There were several envelopes lying on the windowsill. They were so tattered you could tell they were more than 1 year old and were constantly being opened. Kathy, the man called out to her gently. Are you for me? She turned around, looking indifferent. Yes, you, he nodded. What did you want? She stood up and walked over to them. Tomorrow your son will be buried in the village. Will you come with us? He asked her. My son is alive here. He writes letters to me every week, she showed to the strangers. So you don't want to? Stiva realized that it was all useless. No, she shook her head, went and sat back in her seat. Stiva and Allison realized there was nothing more for them to do here. They walked towards the exit. Trevor, they heard Katie's voice. What? The man turned around. Is it true? She asked Steve, even though she thought it was her husband Trevor. Yes, he nodded. Good. Pick me up from the hospital and I'll come with you. After saying that, she went somewhere down the corridor. Doctor, her son will be buried tomorrow. Can we take her? Steve asked the man. You know, I can't give such permission. Only if by our car and with nurses. He couldn't help but let the woman go to her son. Okay, even that would be fine, nodded the man. Why would you want to do that? Allison asked her husband. At least let him see for the last time that all her children were together. He himself didn't know why Steva would do that. Fine, do as you please, she agreed. The next day, the car from the hospital and an ordinary car drove to the very village where Kathy had once lived. They headed straight for the cemetery. This way, Steve showed her. They came to the Ellison place where Kathy's son and daughter were buried, during which time the girl had also been given a memorial. Donald Phenom, she sat down on the bench. Recognized it, Ellison whispered to her husband. Yes, he nodded. And after that, the honor guard lined up. A wooden cross with Anthony's picture on it was made. But the woman sat still. Only when the shots rang out did she flinch. Are you all right? The man asked her. Yes, I need to get home in case a letter arrives and I'm not there. She looked up at Steve. Okay, he looked at the nurses. They got up and put her in the car. Goodbye. The woman waved to them from the window. Goodbye. Steve stood and watched with his wife as the car drove away. Poor woman, did she think her life would turn out this way? Cried Allison. No one knows what might happen next. Steve turned to her. He saw Grandma Georgia approaching them. Hello, he shouted to her. Agassi, she walked over to the fresh grave and knelt down. Is that the neighbor? Allison guessed. Yes, he walked in her direction. Did you bring Katie in? Granny asked. I wanted her to see her children, Steve admitted. And what, you think she was relieved? She looked up at him. I don't know, maybe. He took his wife's hand and they went to their new unfinished house. What are we going to do? Allison turned to him. Move on, they were already approaching the gate. The woman didn't want to go into the yard. And let's call a priest, he will sanctify everything here, suggested the husband. That's a good idea, Allison hugged him. So they did, and when the neighbors saw all these rituals, they decided to do the same. For a long time there was gossip in the village about the coffin Steve had found, but years later, everything is forgotten. Stiva and Ellison live happily in this house. Children come to visit them. They don't know the story that happened to them, but perhaps someday they will be told. Georgia died 6 months after all this. Stiva personally organized her funeral, and Allison helped him. May you do well there, crossed the man at the grave of Katie and Trevor's children. Let's go, Allison called out to him. They went home and thought no more about it.
John, I'm sorry. I come to you with a request. Came to the director of a large firm, one of the employees, who was also a good friend. Speak, I'm listening to you. Put aside the papers of the chief. Listen, take one good woman to work, he asked him. What kind of woman? The principal asked. Jeannie, she used to work for me. She used to help with the household, and now she has nowhere to go, no place to live, no money either. Be a friend, get her a job, even as a cleaner. It's already a penny he asked for her. Well, I don't know, John thought, tapping his pen on the table. He didn't usually hire anyone himself. Other people did that and had done for a long time. But now, indeed, they had a vacancy for a cleaning lady. It wasn't Jenny's fault that she was born into a poor family. Maybe when she came into the world, she was doing well. Mom, Dad, Grandma. They lived in a private house. She remembers the hot stove, the smell of pies. Well, then it got worse and worse. And where is my daddy? This girl remembers that she asked her mom every time she saw other children who went out with their fathers or went to some events. Oh, daughter, if I knew, I would answer that question for you, always sighed Mom. From the time Jenny could remember herself, it had been just the three of them, her mom and her grandmother. Mommy was getting on in age and Grandma was even older. Mommy, do I have to go to this kindergarten? The girl asked in the evening when they picked her up from there. Little girl, how come? I go to work every day and you go to kindergarten? Just like that, from childhood you get accustomed to discipline, the woman explained to her. Memories spent with her mother, the girl kept very carefully. They read fairy tales with her, sometimes composing them themselves. Grandmother was doing something in the kitchen, but the girl saw that she was almost unable to stand on her feet. When the girl went to school, she already knew and could do a lot because her mother taught her this, although she herself was without any education. But by books she taught her girl to read, write, count. You know, as I am interested in school, the girl sat down to her mother when she came from there. Tell me what you do there, the woman asked her. In fact, by this time she was already very ill. The doctors predicted that she would live a year at the most, so she gave all her free time to her daughter. But it is not known what, willpower, or the support of her daughter, or maybe the unwillingness to leave an old sick mother and a small child alone. The woman lasted almost 4 years. Grandma, what about Mommy? Why doesn't she get up? Jenny came to the woman's bedside one morning. Baby, she must be asleep. Let her rest. Breathe very heavily, grandmother. I don't think she's sleeping anymore, cried Jenny. She tried to hold back her tears, but she couldn't. What are you talking about? Granny got out of bed, she grunted. She moved slowly through the house, but she reached the room where her daughter was lying. Aubrey, Aubrey. She pushed her, but the woman was no longer alive. What, Grandma, what? Jenny ran up and put her arms around her. My dear, your mom is gone. She has left us for heaven, and now she will watch and help us from there, cried the old woman. How come? Why did she leave me? Doesn't she love me? Jenny started to cry. My little one, all people died, some sooner, some later. Grandma cried too, but she had shed so many tears in her life. They were already meager now. And then there was a funeral, at which Jenny saw a lot of strangers. She did not understand what was happening. She felt so sorry for her mother that she cried all the time. And then the girl remembers that two strange women came to their house. They knocked on the door. Since the grandmother could not move around the house normally, Jenny opened them herself. Hi, are you Jenny? Asked one of them. Yes, and who are you? Asked the girl in response. And we are kind aunts who are about to take you away to a place where you will be very well, they said. Grandmother, some two aunts have come for me, and they want to take me away, began to shout Jenny. Grandmother got out of bed again, but she was no longer strong enough to get up. She was breathing very hard, coughing. It was obvious that she was having a hard time. Hello. Then the women themselves went to her room. Where are you taking her? The woman looked at them. We can't leave her with you because you are not able to take care of a small child, one of the women said. I realized that myself, Jenny, come here. The grandmother held out her hands. The girl ran up to her. Why should I go with them? I want to stay with you. I can do everything myself. Look, I put the kettle on the stove. I made tea. I can even make my own cakes, the girl cried. She did not want to leave this house. My little girl, tomorrow morning you'll get up and I'll be gone. And what will you do then? Her grandmother soothed her. Please don't, I don't want to, she shouted as the women took her by the arms and dragged her almost by force to the exit. Wait, the grandmother coughed. The custodial staff let go of the girl's hands and she rushed back to the older woman. Jeannie, I think I have not long left. She kissed her on both cheeks, stroked her hair, cried, and then searched somewhere under the mattress and pulled out some string. What is it, grandmother? The girl looked at it very carefully. This is your mother's locket, carry it always with you. Perhaps someday it will bring you luck. She put this pendant around her neck and kissed her. After that, she lay down exhaustedly on her pillow. That's it, Jenny. Come with us. We won't do you any harm. There you will be fed drunk. There are good guys there. You will play and be friends with them, the women said. But the girl knew that was not true. When Jenny arrived at the unfamiliar institution, she decided that she would not be afraid of anyone. She is strong and will do everything. Hi. She walked into the room where there were several other girls. Oh, hi, what do you have there? One of the girls immediately snatched the locket from her neck. Quickly get it back, Jenny ran after her. Catch up, don't catch up, she teased her by waving that very locket. Jenny ran after her as hard as she could. She caught up, but as she did so, the girl stopped and Jenny crashed into her and she fell, breaking her nose. What are you doing? The girl got up. You shouldn't take other people's stuff, Jenny told her. Fuck you, she told her. They both went back to the room. The girl took her bed, and for the first 6 months, they did everything they could to her. And water poured into the bed to make fun of her for shitting her pants. They put buttons on the chairs and threw glass in her shoes. But the girl did not complain to anyone. She tolerated everything because she did not want to be thought of as something different. 5 years dragged on for a very long time, and here, Jenny graduated from school and entered the sewing school, which was in the same city. According to the law, orphanage children should be given apartments, but the local authorities said that there were no apartments available, so Jenny was given a room in the dormitory. She was happy about that. So, Jenny, how are your studies? Sometimes she met social workers on the street. Everything was fine, was always the same answer. Of course, when Jenny was little, this was not what she had dreamed of, but now she had nothing, so she took what life gave her. After graduating from school, she was assigned to the local garment factory. Thank you, she took the direction and went there. The girl did not even think of settling somewhere else. Perhaps she had some preferences, but maybe she just did not want anything. So, tell us, where did you come from? The women who had already worked there for many years asked her. I graduated from the local sewing school and they sent me to work here, Jeannie said naively. But I hope we'll work together, said the one sitting next to her at the table. And from that moment on, Jenny did nothing but stitch on her typewriter. But she didn't have to work there for very long, because soon the sewing shop was disbanded. No one needed it anymore, and all the women workers were made redundant. What am I going to do now? Jeannie was in the kitchen of the dormitory. What to do? What to do? Look for a job, her roommate advised her. She'd been in the same position once. Where will I find a job? Jenny lamented, I have no education, except for sewing, and I can't do anything. So stop moaning. Go to this address. The woman told her that she needed a janitor. Jenny was glad of that too. She took the address, went outside, and went where she was directed. I'll tell you right away, the pay is small. The woman met her there. She showed her the back room where all the tools and work clothes were. I don't need much, just enough to buy bread and pay the rent, Jenny said modestly. Well, there will certainly be enough for that. The main thing is to work well, the woman blessed her. And from the next day, Jenny began her work. She swept the yard, removed various papers, somewhere cut the grass, bushes, but this was not the most important thing for the residents of the house. With all of them, Jenny socialized very well. She would say hello to everyone, wish them a good morning or evening. And one day, when she was about to go home, she noticed that there was something wrong near the entrance. She quickly closed her room and headed over to where something was going on. Behind a bench, either two dogs or cats, something was moving. Jenny couldn't figure out what. And when she approached, it appeared that there was a man standing there on all fours. What's the matter? She bent over the man. Oh, Jenny, I don't know, I felt bad. I wanted to sit down on the bench. But I couldn't, he told her, and his head was down. Now Jenny ran into the entryway to call an ambulance. She did it quickly. The car came and Jack was taken then to the hospital, but it wasn't for long. A few days later he came back. Jenny, hello. He came out of the driveway, saw her sweeping the yard, and came over. Jack, are you all right? She was happy when she saw him. Yes, I'm fine, and you? He looked at her clothes, at the broom. What could happen to me? I'm just breathing fresh air, sweeping the yard, she said. Jenny, you know what? I want to offer you a job, Jack said. What kind of job? She didn't understand. My wife died a long time ago. There is a daughter, but she has grown up, lives in another place. Do you want to work in my house, to help with the household? I won't hurt your wages, he offered her. Of course I'll help you. I'll even help you for free, Jenny agreed with him. No, I don't want free help. You're quitting here, and you'll work only for me, he told her. Okay, I agree, she quickly agreed. Jenny wasn't lazy. She did all the tasks that were needed. Cleaning around the house, washing dishes, dusting, even those antique figurines that had been in the wall for years. She took everything out, rinsed and wiped. Oh, Jenny, what a good girl you are. He couldn't get enough of how clean and fresh his house was now, Jack. He was telling John all this now, interceding for Jeannie. So I don't get it. If she was working for you, what happened? He asked him. What? My daughter separated from her husband. They had a fight. She packed her things and moved in with me. Well, naturally, seeing the young, not very well-dressed woman in the house while I wasn't home kicked her out the door. And when I came back, Jeannie was gone. And the next morning I saw that she was in our yard again, asking for a job as a janitor, but the vacancy was gone. So I came to you to hire her as a janitor. Basically, it's my fault. If she'd been working in our yard now, she'd have been working. But I had to get her to quit, Jack lamented. You've given me a hard time, Jack. He emphasized his name with a loud thud. You're not hiring her as an accountant or a deputy. You're hiring her as a cleaner, so take her on a trial basis. If she fails, we'll tell her about it, and that's it. She's good and kind, the comrade continued to ask. Okay, you've got it. Bring your Jenny here, said the headmaster. Thank you, nice man thanked him, and before he could change his mind, Jack left his office and rushed to his house to meet Jenny in the yard. John himself had his own story to tell, and perhaps that was why he now felt sorry for this girl his good friend had spoken of. Once upon a time, little John had gone to school. He wore an old uniform with worn knees and elbows, but the boy didn't realize it at the time. John, God forbid you do something at school. You'll be standing in the corner at home all night, his strict mother threatened him with her finger. I won't do anything. I'll study for 4s and 5s. and then I'll become big. Then I'll be the director of the factory," he told her then. "Oh, what can I take from you?" His mother waved her hand at him. But John really from the very first school session began to learn. He wanted to have only A's. The boy really believed that if he studied well, he would do well in life. But when he was already in the 5th grade and thought something, he realized a lot. "Mom, why are we poor?" he asked her at home. "Well, we're not poor. We're just an average family," the woman told him. "I'm average. I've been wearing this uniform for 3 years. He pointed to his pants, which were obviously hemmed and then unfolded. "Why spend money on a uniform when you can buy one and wear it? You don't go out, you don't go anywhere, only to school," his mother explained to him. In fact, they really did not have much. Their parents saved on everything, so sometimes they could afford to take their son somewhere or buy him something. When the boy was in 9th grade, he realized that he needed to do something himself. He began to barter different things from classmates, from some acquaintances. Money started to appear, but not so big, just to buy something small. "John, come here. It's a day he'll never forget." His father had been sent on a business trip, and he had brought him some sneakers. The kid looked at those shoes, and he couldn't believe it. "Dad, where did you get them? Or rather, where did you get the money for them?" "I sold my skis," answered his father. In fact, the boy later learned that his father sold a collection of ancient books to get money to buy him sneakers. After school, John studied at the technical college. That's where he had a lot of friends and then memories. Although the guy did not have a financial component, but he had charisma and brains. When he entered the dormitory, he knew a lot, knew how to do different things, told guys and girls. Once, when they were in the first year, on New Year's holidays, the guys went to the square of the technical school, near the Christmas tree. John saw a girl there, and he was so attracted to her that he decided to meet her. Do you guys know who she is? When school started, John saw her in the cafeteria. "Come on, she's a 4th year," it laughed at him. "So what difference does it make who's in what year?" He didn't understand. "So she's a few years older than you," they told him. "I don't care." He didn't understand that, as long as I liked her. "Okay, this is Julianne, the daughter of the local tycoon," one of the students answered John. "Who's a real estate mogul?" The kid didn't get it. "You know, the biggest building in this town," he asked him then. "Yes. Is it that factory?" After a short thought, he asked. "That's right, that factory, so that's its owner," the guy said. "Wow, why is she studying here, in a technical school, and not in some institute?" John was surprised. No one knows. Either her parents decided to punish her that way, or she decided to punish her parents that way, his friends answered him. The next day, he went to the technical school and took with him a pack of gum, which he still had from a long time ago, but he kept it until better times. "Julianne, hi." He approached her in the hallway at recess. She turned, looked at him, and walked on. "Why are you leaving? Let's get acquainted." He followed her. "You know what my name is, and what yours is. I'm not interested in that at all," she told him then. "My name is John," he shouted back at her. "Adieu, John," she walked on. It was obvious that the girl was spoiled. She didn't want anything or anyone. But John wasn't the type to give up at the first minute. Today, he left her behind, came to the dormitory, and spent the whole evening writing something in his notebook. "What are you writing?" His friends who lived with him didn't understand. "You wouldn't understand," he told them. Actually, John was writing poetry. He had once been good at it as a child, and now he decided to remember his talent. When everyone in the room was asleep, he had everything ready. The boy sealed the sheet in an envelope, signed it to Juliana from John. And when he was in tech school the next day, he ran up to her again. "Julianne, hello." He said hello to her again. She only curled her lips and looked away. At that time, he discreetly slipped this envelope into her bag. When she got home, she saw some paper in her bag, took it out, saw the inscription, who the message was from, and smiled. At first, she wanted to tear it up and throw it away, but then she decided to read it. As she finished the poem, tears welled up in her eyes. John wrote about unrequited love, about how he saw her for the first time and fell in love immediately. That she was so unapproachable, but he'd be smitten and she'd become his wife. The next day, there was a party at the technical school, followed by a dance. John ironed his costume and came all handsome, but Julianne wasn't there. He was very upset about it, waited a little longer in case she came, but when she didn't show up, he gave up and went back to the dorm. No sooner had he left the building than he heard his name. John, he turned around. Julian was standing behind the bushes. What are you doing here? Why aren't you coming in? There are all the guys at the dance, he asked her. Come here, she called out to him. He walked over and looked into her beautiful eyes. What did you want? His knees were shaking. His tongue was slurring. He didn't know how to control himself. Listen, there are so many girls there. My friends, I don't want to be with you in front of them. Let's go for a walk, she called him. John was very hurt that Julian didn't want to be seen with him in public, but he couldn't pass up the chance to go out with her. They walked into some courtyard and sat there at a table. The guy was still shaking. Why are you shaking so much? She asked him. I don't know, I see you and I start shaking. I wrote you everything in the poem. After these words, somehow it became easier. Of course, I am pleased with your advances, but you realize that you are a juvenile, she said to him. What difference does it make? A woman can be younger than a man, but a man can't be younger, right? And the age difference between us is small. He started giving her different examples. Okay, I agree to go out with you, to get to know you a little, but if something will not be my way, then we immediately break up. What was with the man? No one can understand. Inside John's heart was beating so that probably hurt half the dorm. Why are you so happy? His friends asked him. No reason, he answered them, though he really wanted to tell them that he was out with Julianne, who he liked so much. From that day on, the boy and the girl began to meet every evening and secretly go to some yard, sit on benches. A couple of times they even went to the movies and once to a dance. When Juliana finished her education and had a graduation party, they didn't go there, but went to her house. Who's that? Dad asked from the door. Maybe he had just gotten home from work or something. He was wearing a strict suit. Mom, Dad, me, John. This is John, my young man, Julian told them then. What? They looked at the guy who, first of all, was younger, and secondly, was standing in some crumpled pants and an obscure shirt. What don't you like, weren't you? Daddy always like this? Immediately became the owner of the company. The daughter was indignant. Okay, friends did not argue mother and father because they knew that the daughter cannot change her mind. But she had already finished her education, and he still had a long time to study. During this time, a lot could change. With each month and year, the relationship between John and Juliana only grew stronger. And when the young man finished his studies, Julian advised him to go to get a job at his father's firm. Come on, he'd never hire me, John told her. Look, I know better. You're smart, intelligent, grasping, you'll do well. You just try, it's worth a try, she persuaded him. By this time, the girl herself was still not working anywhere. Hello, the young man came to his girlfriend's father. Why did you come here? He looked at him haughtily. I want to get a job with you. John did not say that he was sent here by Julian, or advised or something else. Ha ha ha, and you think I'm gonna hire you as what, a deputy? What do you want to be? After all, you're supposedly my daughter's future husband. He spoke to him very rudely. Why? Take me a simple specialist. I am ready to go to the lowest position you have and prove that I am not so bad. Just because I was born into a poor family doesn't mean I don't have abilities and I won't be able to do something, reasoned John out loud. Okay, said the man then. He realized that if he turned the boy down now, his daughter might resent him. So he ordered that he be taken on as a technician. The guy didn't mind. He wanted to work and could do it. He was never shy about anything. John started working, and after a few months, Julian's father saw that the young man is smart. He brings some new ideas. He wants and knows how to work. Then he promoted him to a specialist in the sales department. He worked there for several years, and sales reached a new level. I couldn't be happier. John, come into my office. The director called him. Yes, Oliver, I'm listening to you, came to him. I don't know what kind of suitor you are for my daughter, but I can see how you work. I'm appointing you head of sales. I hope everything goes well. At this point, John realized that he had gained the trust of his, as he hoped, future father-in-law. In the evening, he came to visit them. By this point, they had been living with Julian for years, but his parents were still against it. Oliver, Jenny, I want to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage, he said, and got down on one knee in front of the girl. She cried then and looked at her mom. And why are you looking at me? Make your own decision. Julian then turned her gaze to her father, and he only gave her a thumbs up, thus approving of their union. Finally, they could get married. By this time, John was earning enough to feed his family. John and Julianne loved each other very much. They could not imagine how they would live separately. Many years passed, but they could not have children. It was very upset both parents, but no one could do anything. When 20 years passed, John was climbing higher and higher up the ladder, and it was not the merits of his father-in-law, but his own. One day his boss called him back into his office. "John, we've been living together for a long time, you're my family, but that's not the only reason why I want to offer you something," Oliver told him. "And what is it you want to offer me?" John looked at him surprised. "I am already so tired that I want to hand over all the powers to you. I can see that you can handle all of this. So from today, I am the owner of the company and you are its director," Oliver told him and shook his hand. There was so much trust in that handshake that John couldn't let him down. And now that John had been sitting as director for many years, he was asked to take on the position of a cleaning lady, just like he used to be. The man couldn't refuse. He just wanted to know more about her, who she was, why she put her hands down and didn't try any further. For that, he summoned her to his office. "Hello." She seemed to be young, but because of her appearance, she seemed to be a woman. "Come in," John nodded to her. Jenny was sitting there dead or alive. The headmaster himself had called her into his office. She had only worked here for a short time. What could have happened? "It's okay. There's no need to be scared or nervous." He tried to reassure her. He could see she was scared. Yeah, she didn't look up at him. "So Jenny, tell me about yourself." He didn't know where to start. "Why do you want to know and what do you want to know?" She squirmed in her chair. "Well, why, I know something about all the employees, about their families, a little about their personal lives." He stood up and began to walk around the office. "I thought Jack had told you everything since you hired me." She was embarrassed to even raise her eyes at him. "Yes, he gave me a little outline of the situation, but I do not know the details." "Why? So young and energetic, and nothing." He didn't understand. It so happened that after the orphanage, she cried and could not say anything more. "I don't mean money or property, education, some ambitions. Where is it all? You need to go forward and achieve your own, no matter what obstacles and difficulties stand in front of you." He took his chair again. "Am I doing something wrong?" She smeared tears on her face. No, on the contrary, everything is fine. That's what surprises me, and imagine this diligence and stubbornness of yours to direct in the right direction," John reasoned. "Can you change anything?" She looked at him and couldn't believe it herself. "Where do you live now?" he asked Jenny bluntly. "In the dormitory." She wasn't hiding that from anyone. "Is it bad there?" He guessed it himself. "It's fine." She didn't want to complain to anyone. "Well, do you want our firm to send you for training?" The man himself doesn't know why he was so attracted to this woman. Probably because Jack recommended her. I don't even know. She was twiddling her thumbs in excitement. "Okay, tell me what you wanted to be when you were a kid." He immediately remembered himself. His dreams had come true. "I don't know." She really might have dreamed of something, but now she's already forgotten. John looked at his subordinate and he felt so sorry for her. In fact, she had no home, no money, nothing. It was Jack who had brought her here. "Yeah, the pay is good here, even for the maintenance staff." "All right, stop crying. Take a tissue." He handed her a napkin across the table. "Thank you." She reached for it. At that moment, something fell out from under her blouse and hit the table. "What is it?" the man in charge asked. "Nothing, just a locket." She tucked it back under her blouse. "Show me." He didn't know why he was so interested, but it reminded him of something. "Why do you want it?" Jenny was scared again, in case they thought she had stolen it. "My grandmother gave it to me." The girl took the jewelry off her neck. "Somewhere I've already." He twirled it in his hands, and suddenly he looked at his wife's picture. She had the same one hanging around her neck. "What?" Jenny followed his gaze. "How can that be?" He handed the locket back to the hostess. "Well, there's no such thing as identical jewelry." The girl didn't understand. "I won't say, but it seems to me that Oliver, my late wife's father, made only 2 of them to order," John said thoughtfully. "So maybe this is one of them?" Jenny didn't know what to tell her anymore. "Exactly. My wife is buried in one of them, and the other?" He stopped talking again. "Where?" Now she thought for sure she was going to be blamed. "That's what we have to find out. He called and told me to bring him a car." "I'll go then." Jenny got up and wanted to leave the office. "No, dearie, you're coming with me, since you're the one who started it all." He opened the door for her. As they walked to the car, and drove to his father-in-law's house. John thought back to how he and Julian had lived their life. "How much I love you," he admired her. "And no matter what anyone said, you loved her for her beauty, her soul, her kindness. If it hadn't been for your persistence, we certainly wouldn't be together." Julian hugged him. "So it was fate," he believed it. "Sometimes fate needs to be channeled to make things right," she laughed. At first, they lived in the apartment their father had given them. But after John started contributing various new ideas, Oliver gathered everyone at his house around the table. "So children, I insist that you move in with us. It's easier to live together, and no one will miss anyone," he said. "I don't know," Julian looked at her husband uncertainly. "I don't mind. We have so much to do with Oliver. I won't even leave the house." He looked at his father-in-law. "That's it. Then it's decided. Tomorrow you move out, and someone else needs the apartment. We have a lot of people working," the man said. After the move, it became somehow easier, more cordial. Julian is always with her mother. They cooked together, talked, did something. And John and Oliver could sit in his office until the very morning, arguing and discussing some plan. Once Juliana got up in the morning, she went to the kitchen to make breakfast. But when she got to the stairs, she couldn't help herself and fainted. "Daughter, what's wrong?" Her mom came running up to her. "I don't know, I just felt dizzy," she said. "Jesus, sit down, John." She called her son-in-law. When everything was back to normal, the men went to work and the women stayed in the house. John wanted children so badly, and with all his heart, he thought that was what was making his wife dizzy. And then she began to feel nauseous, fainting more frequently. Julian was rushed to the hospital to confirm or deny the pregnancy, but no one expected what the doctor would say. "Your wife has a tumor, and I'm afraid it's not benign," said the doctor when he came out after the examination, but it was necessary to wait for the final result. "How can that be? She's still so young." Jenny lamented. Even though her daughter was in her 40s, she still hoped she would have a child. After that began treatment, courses of chemotherapy, surgery abroad. But it is right to say that health for any money cannot buy. 4 hard years in hospitals, sometimes it seemed that there was a result, but passed some time and again got worse. "My love, I'm leaving, but I'll always be with you. Be happy. Don't think of me." She took his hand, but there was no strength in it. "Juliana, my dear, how can it be? Why do you leave me alone?" He cried and kissed her thin cheeks and hands. "Don't." She put her hand on his head, but couldn't hold it, dropped it on the bed. "Love," he whispered with just his lips. "Ouch." She wrinkled her nose. That was it. Julian didn't say another word. Her head just tilted a little to the side. "Jesus, why?" John shouted across the house. "What's wrong?" The mother-in-law came running in, but as soon as she looked into the room, she immediately realized everything. "Julian." She fell to her knees in front of the bed. There were a lot of people here to say goodbye to Julian. Her and John's friends were here, everyone who knew her father, her mother. People were grieving. They could not understand how such a young and beautiful woman could burn so quickly. "John," he heard the driver addressing him. "Eh? What?" He came out of his reverie. "Here we are." He pointed to the gate of the house. Yes, he shook his head, then turned his head, saw Jenny, remembered why they were here. But thoughts of his wife could not leave his mind. Now as they walked through the yard, he saw images of her everywhere. "Okay, first we're going to go to my office and check something out." He raised a finger in the air. When they entered, John quickly logged into his computer and started searching the internet for similar medallions, but nothing like that was there. "You didn't find it?" Jenny was standing by the door. "No, but he had to make sure, so as not to look like a fool in his father-in-law's eyes," he muttered. Only then did he invite the young woman to go on ahead. "Mom, Dad, hello, and I'm not alone." John had been calling them that for a long time. It was only at work that he observed the subordination. "Who with?" "A man and a woman sitting in a large room by the fireplace." "Here, let me introduce Jeannie." He stepped back. The girl stood behind him. She squirmed because she was embarrassed and uncomfortable. "Something this picture reminds me of," laughed Jenny. Yes, exactly, déjà vu, only instead of a daughter now a son. They were looking at the poor tramp that was standing here in their house. "No, it's not at all what you think," John smiled. "Look." After saying that, he held out his hand to Jenny, and she handed him the locket. "This is the jewelry I ordered for my wife and daughter," Oliver said. He looked at Jenny with surprise. "That's me too. When I saw it, I immediately decided to look into it. John set up chairs for himself and Ginny. "Pass it to me, please," his wife asked. The man handed her the locket in his hands. Yes, indeed, it was the very same pendant. She couldn't believe she was holding it in her hands. "But how?" John looked at her. "Wait," Ginny hooked it with her fingernail. There was a slight click. The little lid opened, and inside was a picture of Julian. "What is this?" John was stunned. He took the locket in his hands and couldn't figure out where the tramp had gotten this thing. But Oliver looked at his wife. "I made it for you with your picture, and for my daughter with hers." It was confusing, John thought. And Ginny looked at everything going on. She too had never seen that there was a picture inside. "So, I don't understand, did you put your locket on Juliana? Because I remember that she wore it, and we buried her in it." The head of the family got up from his seat. "No." Ginny had a look of surprise on her face. "Well, if that's not true, then where's yours? And where did this girl get hers?" The man insisted that everything be explained to him. Now the woman went to her room. On the way she said something about how she hadn't worn or seen her locket in a long time. "Well, what about you? Can you explain something?" Oliver turned to Ginny, who had been standing there silent the whole time. "Nothing," she shrugged. "I already told you. My grandmother gave me this piece of jewelry. I thought it was some kind of talisman." "Why are you shivering?" Looked at his son-in-law to make tea for the guest. Now he got up from his seat and went to fulfill the request. "Tell me, do you remember your parents, grandmother, or anyone else?" Jenny's interrogation began while no one was in the room. "Mom was very good, and when she was gone, I was taken to an orphanage. Then my grandmother died. They loved me very much," sighed the girl. "It is clear. So now there is no one to ask how you came into the world, and where you got this thing." He played with the medallion in his hand. "It turns out so," cried Ginny, because her mental wounds had been dealt with. No need to cry. Already the second man today had calmed her down. "How can one not cry when fate is so difficult?" said Ginny. At that moment John came back into the room. He brought a tray on which 4 cups with fragrant tea were smoking. He set everything on the table. There were cookies here too. Right behind him came Ginny. She said she had looked through all the boxes, but the locket was nowhere to be found. "So, family, are we going to find out more, or are we going to stop here?" Oliver asked everyone present. "Maybe Julianne lost or left that pendant and this girl or her mother just picked it up," suggested Ginny. "Well, if you don't want to, and I want to get to the truth, what if she had the locket for a reason?" John got up from his seat and walked over to Ginny and handed her the jewelry. "Thank you," she said quietly. John waited for the girl to finish her tea, and they got back into the car and drove off. "Where are you going?" he asked Ginny. "To work. I've done practically nothing today." She was also honest. "Then let's go together. I have to go there too. I have a lot to do," John agreed with her. They arrived together, got out of the car, entered the building. Already at the security post, the laughter started. John looked back at them, but decided to just pass by. "I'm going to go do some work," Ginny told him modestly. She stood looking at her feet. "Okay, if you think of anything, don't hesitate to come straight to my office. If you get stopped, here's my number, call me." He handed her a business card. "Thank you for the 1,000th time today," she said that word. John went to his office. He was surprised that the girl grew up in a poor family, was unhappy from childhood, then was brought up in an orphanage. But still she did not lose her humanity. Ginny cleaned and washed for the rest of the afternoon. She was going over the memories she had of her family, but nothing new came to mind. Suddenly she stopped. "Aunt Leslie," she said out loud. At that moment some staff members were walking past her, and they glanced at the girl. After that, Ginny finished what she had started and then walked over to John. "Where are you going?" The girl who was sitting in the waiting room asked her. "He told me to come in unimpeded," pointed Ginny to the door of the main one. "No shit," sniggered the pretty girl and looked Ginny upside down. "Call him?" the cleaning lady asked. "I'm not going to call him because of the technician." The girl continued to mind her own business. "Then I'll call him myself," Ginny said, and pulled a business card out of her pocket. "Funny, even I don't have his phone number." She didn't look at her visitor. "I do," she dialed the phone number. The receptionist was now looking at Ginny haughtily. She thought she was provoking her on purpose. "Hello, John, as you said. They won't let me see you," the girl said and looked at the girl. No sooner had Ginny disconnected than the headmaster appeared in the reception area. "What's going on here?" Do you really think if I hadn't told her to come in, Jenny would have come here? He spoke in a raised tone. I understood, almost sliding under the desk of the secretary. Let's go, the boss said in a different tone to the janitor. That's it, you can't avoid the gossip now, Jenny told him quietly. It's okay, I'm not afraid of it at all, he assured her. You know, now that I was working, I tried to remember something, but nothing came to mind. But there was Aunt Leslie, who lived next door. She might know something, Jenny said very quickly, stammering and blushing. What are we still standing here for? Let's go. He took the girl under his arm, and together they walked out of the study. John, are you still coming today? The girl in the waiting room shouted after him. No, he didn't even turn to her. They left the building, got into the car again, and drove to the address where Jenny used to live. The girl hadn't been here for a very long time. When they pulled up to where their house used to stand, it was no longer in that spot. This is not our house, Jenny looked at it. How is it not yours, and where is yours? He stared at her. John, I don't know, torn down I guess. Jenny wasn't sure of anything. We'll figure it out, he told her, and ran up the driveway. On the intercom he dialed the apartment at random. The woman, after some bickering, opened it for him. They went in and knocked on the very apartment they had dialed into the intercom. Who? John heard the same question she'd asked him when he dialed the numbers. I was just calling you to open the door for me, the man told her. He was already nervous. Hello, she opened it for him. You will excuse us, of course, but we would like to know how long ago this house was built. He quickly asked the question. Oh, you know, about 10 years ago, maybe more, thought the woman. Can I ask you another question? And the house that used to stand here, do you know where its tenants were moved to? He hoped that now she would tell them the address. Yes, of course, they all moved to the houses they built near the train station, she said as if she knew that for a fact. Jenny smiled, something stirred in her chest, her excitement even greater than before. They were back in the car, driving to the address the woman had given them, both of them so enthusiastic that they hadn't even thought about how they were going to find the right person. And now they're standing in the driveway again. So, John turned to Jeannie. What? She turned to him. What's your Aunt Leslie's last name? How are we going to find her in this building? Calling every apartment. He looked at the windows of the three-building building. I don't know what to do. Jenny regretted wearing the locket to work, and she would have kept it at home. But no one would have had any questions. She would be in the office now, scrubbing floors and not going anywhere with anyone. Okay. Come on, if that Aunt Leslie was friends with your mom, she's not that young. The neighbors are probably the same age and everyone knows her. He stepped confidently toward the entryway. At that moment, an elderly woman came out of it. Who are you here to see? She asked them when she saw that the man and the girl wanted to go inside. You know, this is going to sound ridiculous, but we're looking for a certain Aunt Leslie. John told her about Jenny, who lived with her mother and grandmother, and that the one they were looking for was their neighbor. I know her. She lives in the second entrance in apartment 28. She pointed in the direction. Thank you very much. You have no idea how much you helped us. John was ready to kiss her. They quickly found the apartment they wanted and rang the intercom. Leslie didn't want to let them in for a long time because she didn't understand who they were and what they wanted. But eventually John managed to convince her. The apartment was on the 4th floor, which was the last one in the building. They knocked on the door. When the woman opened it for them, they actually saw practically a grandmother in front of them. Aunt Leslie, hello, I'm Jenny, the one next to the man told her. Jenny, she couldn't believe her eyes, my dear. Why are you so thin? My God, if I saw you in the street, I'd think you were a grown woman. Well, we'll hug later, but now we need to know something. John stopped their kissing. Yes, of course. Leslie led them into the kitchen. She sat them down at the table and poured tea. Then she sat down on a chair. So John put Jenny's locket in front of him. He sat and twirled it in his hands. Yes, I'm listening. What did you want to know? Was curious about the woman. Can you remember anything about your neighbor, Jenny's mother? The man began to ask questions. About Aubrey? Leslie turned her eyes to the girl. Apparently, yes. John looked at the girl as well. She lived with her mom, didn't stand out, was always quiet. We were only friends when we were at home, like neighbors. Leslie began to remember. Well, and where she worked or what she did? What she did? Asked leading questions man. Jenny, don't you remember where your mom worked? The woman was very surprised. I know she was scrubbing floors somewhere, but where? She shrugged. Anna worked at the local maternity hospital, Leslie interjected. That changes things completely. John lit up like a light bulb. He started gathering his things from the table, not forgetting his locket. What happened? Just now the landlady decided to ask. You see, and come with us, I'll tell you everything on the way. John called her with him. Yes, of course. Just now I'll get dressed. Quickly went to Leslie's room. Meanwhile, John and Jenny were already sitting in the car waiting for her. When the woman came out and got into the car, she couldn't catch her breath for a long time at first, but when she calmed down, she gave them the address, and together they drove off. So what's the story? She reminded John that there was something he wanted to tell her. A good acquaintance of hers had asked to get Jenny a job. From that point on, he told her how and what happened. Oh girl, what a difficult fate you have, empathized her former neighbor. Yes, no one can envy, she lowered her eyelashes. They drove up to the very maternity hospital Leslie was talking about. I'm sorry, I'll wait for you in the car, the woman asked them. Sure, sit. John and Jenny, they told her to stay here. They themselves ran into the premises. Naturally, they were met only where there was a food transfer point. You see, I'm looking for a man, he told the nurse who came out to him there. But I won't let you inside anyway, she said. Well, ask her yourself then. 35 years ago, you had a woman working here. Her name was Anna. I need to know something about her, John said quickly. Could you wait a bit? The girl asked him. Sure enough, the girl disappeared out the door. It had only been about 10 minutes, but it seemed like hours to John. He didn't know why he was so anxious, why he was going through all this, but he wanted to get to the end since he had already started. He had been so stubborn since childhood. When the nurse came out, she handed him a piece of paper. What is this? The man looked at her. She couldn't have given him Jenny's mother's address. It's Michael's address. He used to work here as a gynecologist. He's long retired now. He's old, but he worked with her, the woman you're looking for. The staff here has changed a long time ago. Maybe he knows something. It was like she was ashamed of herself for not finding anything for them. Thank you for this. The man along with Jenny got back into the car and he gave the driver a new address. The man was already chuckling that they were like bloodhounds on the trail today. Once again, they were outside some house, but here they had an easier situation because it was a private house which was divided into two halves. Well, do we knock here or here? John couldn't decide. Come on, you go this way, I'll go this way, Jenny suggested. Okay, as you say. John knocked on one gate, Jenny knocked on the other. But to their luck, no one opened the gate, but John was met by a young girl. Hello, she looked at him surprised. Were you here to see? I'm looking for Michael. He read his name again on the piece of paper. Grandpa? She looked surprised. Yes, he must be your grandfather. He used to work as a gynecologist at the local maternity hospital, John clarified for her. It was indeed so. The landlady confirmed his words. She let everyone into the house. Leslie, like last time, stayed in the car. John went into the room. There was an elderly man lying in bed. Michael? He approached him, thinking he was asleep. Yes, he said without opening his eyes. Can I talk to you? The man asked him. What did you want? He opened his eyes. Many years ago, Anna worked in your maternity hospital. She was a cleaner. Can you tell me anything about her? John rambled on. No, I don't know anything. Get out of here. If just now the man was lying with his eyes closed and moving, now he was almost running around the room. Michael got up on the bed, first sat up, then stood up, went to the window, moved away from it, went back to the bed. You could see the man was nervous. I can see you know something, John told him. Who are you? Michael turned to him. I've come to find out about Anna, he repeated. I don't know you. John thought the old man was just mocking him. I don't know you either, but you were the chief gynecologist then, so maybe you could remember something. John was sure that this man knew something. Okay, that's enough. The girl who met them entered the room. But I need to know something. John looked at her with a pleading look. My dad has a disease. He sometimes doesn't recognize us either. How will he tell you what happened years ago? Every now and then he has a memory and he starts to tell us something, but no one knows what it is. She took John's hand and started to lead him out of the room. Wait, but maybe he'll remember something. John wanted to get to the truth today. He won't remember anything. The girl almost pushed the guests out the door, and they returned to the car. Well? Jenny asked, who was waiting for him at the door and hadn't heard anything. Nothing. He was angry. Leslie, who was waiting for them in the car, perked up. "So, how's Michael doing?" She was also curious. "He is not doing well, old sclerotic." John was angry. "Why do you say that?" Jenny shouted at him. "Yeah, I'm sorry. It's just that there was a real clue that would have told us a lot of things. But he's sick and can't remember anything." John was shaking. "I remembered something." Leslie smiled. "What was it?" John turned to her. "Anna had a friend at work who told me about her," the woman said. "Why didn't you say anything before?" The man glared at her. "Well, I'm sorry. She's not young. Her memory's not so good either," the woman told him. "Do you know where she lives?" There was a question immediately. "No, but it can be found in the archives of the maternity hospital," said Leslie. "Well then, let's go back," and they drove back to the maternity hospital where they had just been. It was the same girl meeting John again. She had found the address of the person they were looking for, and as she handed him the slip of paper, she looked at him so much that he was surprised. "I don't think you'll find this woman," she told him. "Why do you think that?" John knew he could do anything. "Look at the year she was born." The girl pointed with her finger. John lowered his eyes, counted in his mind. At this point, she had to be about 85 years old. "Okay, we'll figure it out." He went back to the car and thought to himself that his mother-in-law was now 74 years old, and she still looked very good. Why shouldn't this woman still be in normal condition? But he could not miss the chance, and they drove back to the new address. Here they did not have to look for anything. The house was on the very outskirts of the city, shabby with one window, and the man knocked on it. In the window appeared the face of a woman who did not look 80 years old at all. She waved for him to go inside the gate himself. John waved to those in the car to stay there and went inside. They sat at the table and there was no one else in the house. John wondered very much why this woman was talking to him and who she was. "Where is Maria?" he asked her. "I am Maria," she said. "Are you eating young apples?" He wondered what she looked like. Yes, she had wrinkles on her face, but not to say she was 80+ years old. "It's my genetics," the woman laughed. "My mom died at 98, and in her coffin she looked like a girl," she told him. "So we're looking for your friend Anna. Or rather, we're not looking for her. We're looking for information about her." John was talking very fast again. "I know roughly why you came here." Maria took a mug of tea in her hands. "And why is that?" John looked at her. "Anna and I met when she came to work at our maternity hospital. She was a quiet, calm girl, always helped everyone, never refused. Everyone loved her, and I became friends with her." She looked out the window, tears rolling from her eyes. "Why are you crying?" John didn't understand why she was telling him all this. "Pity," was all she said. "Who are you sorry for?" The man didn't understand. "Pity for everyone." She took a sip of tea. "Why?" He couldn't understand. "Why what?" She wiped away her tears. "Why pity?" He wanted to get a normal answer out of her. Sometimes in life it happens that you have to do something bad, and then a lot of people suffer because of it. And you just don't realize at that moment what will happen next, the woman reasoned. "So tell me, what are you pulling? What was there?" John finally realized that this was probably the last instance they'd come to. "You wanted to know about Jenny?" She tilted her head to the side. "Yes." The man's eyes widened because he was right in his guess. "Now wait." After saying that, the man ran outside and waved his hand for Jenny to come inside. She quickly did so, and now the three were sitting at the table. "Jenny, hi. Don't you remember me? I'm Aunt Maria." She took her hand. "No," she shook her head. "Well, yes. That's right. How can you remember me? I was your guest when you were very young. And after that, all I did was take care of your mom in hospitals because no one else could do it. So this is Maria. She was friends with your mom. They worked together, and now she wants to tell us something, right?" John couldn't take it anymore. "Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to do anything to anyone now. What's there to hide? But to be honest, I thought I'd get away with this secret," sighed Maria and sipped her tea again. "Well, tell me already." John couldn't wait. "Do you know a woman called Julienne?" She looked at him. "Of course it's my late wife, but that's her maiden name. We have a different one now." His hands began to shake. "So when Julienne was brought to the maternity hospital, I was working as an orderly. As soon as she said the first words, John jumped up from the table. "You must be confused. We didn't have children. My wife was never pregnant." He was red in the face. You could see the excitement was building. No, I'm not confused about anything, she told him. Okay, I'm in complete shock right now. I don't understand anything, and I'm asking to be told everything in order, John said cockily. What to say? Juliana and her mom came to us at night. The girl had contractions. She was immediately taken to the delivery room. There she gave birth. The woman looked surprised at him. Taak, he stepped away from them. John was now counting to himself how old he was when Jenny was born. At some point he stopped, froze, slowly shifted his gaze to Maria. What are you looking at me like that for, remember? She guessed. And what else was there? Who was there? Who brought? Who delivered the baby? He pelted the woman with questions. He leaned over her and stood like that. I don't know anything. I was just a nurse. I brought the ducks and washed the floors everywhere. The woman almost cried. Well, here they are. Who was the gynecologist? John wouldn't leave her alone. Boo-hoo, we had one for everyone, Michael. She did not hesitate a minute. What a bastard. John thumped the table at the time. I take it you've been to see him too? Maria guessed. I was, but his granddaughter said he was sick. His head was not right. He didn't remember anything. John exhaled heavily and sat down on the chair. Anything is possible. Seeing so much in my life, the woman held her head and shook it. Okay, was there no other people besides you on this day at all? John didn't let go of the thin thread that was leading him to an answer. It was all at night. The woman shook her head negatively. I see, when you have money you can do anything, he sighed. That's it. I've told you everything. Maria hurried to kick the guest out of the house. She did not want to rake up the past. No, John smiled. What else? She paused. You haven't told us the most important thing. Julian may have given birth at night, even if it was secretly. But what does that have to do with Anna? The man stopped talking. Look, are you trying to drive me crazy? It was obvious that the woman did not want to say anything more. And I insist, sat down next to Jenny, who all this time was silent. John, why would you do that now? Wondered the woman. At that moment, John thought that Julian's locket might have fallen out of her pocket and the janitor or nurse had picked it up without telling anyone. Just like that, just out of curiosity, he smiled. Okay, the labor was very difficult. You could hear it in the screams, she began to tell me. But the baby did come. That was John's main concern right now. Yes, but, she lowered her eyes. What but? The man didn't understand. He was already in anticipation of what he was about to learn. He was born dead or died later. I don't know, Maria said, and thought that now everyone would definitely leave her alone. How's that? Now something went wrong again. Don't you know how dead babies can be born? Trauma, poisoning, something else. Maria looked out the window. It was already dark outside. And then where did you put him? Tears appeared in the man's eyes. The child. Realized the former nurse. Yes, shouted John, because he couldn't stand it any longer. When the doctors told the girl that her baby had died, she called me to her and gave me this locket to put with the girl. She pointed to the jewelry that was in John's hands. Now, what about you? The man didn't understand. Why, I'm just an orderly. They gave me a package. I carried it, and everything started to move. Maria made big eyes at those who were here. I think there's something wrong with this story. Those secretly, those carried it. Dead, alive. What's going on? He couldn't understand anything at all. I went to Anna. She was my friend. I showed her everything and told her. She was shocked at what was going on. And if I was afraid, she wasn't. We unwrapped the package, and there was a little girl lying there. She was very small, but alive. Now Maria herself was crying. And then what happened? John was in shock. Nothing. The mother and Julian had already left us. They didn't want anyone to see them. Michael had gone home. It was just the midwife and me and Aubrey. She wasn't looking at them. And the baby? Jeannie spoke up. The baby girl turned out to be a grip on life. She was lying in a little crib. Anna was taking such good care of her. Mary said dotingly. Why did you tell anyone about this? John didn't understand at the time. Who was to tell? I told you there was no one at the time. But in the morning, when Michael came to work again, we told him everything. The woman resented. And him? John was pulling the words out of Maria like a pincer. And he, she grinned, must have gotten a lot of money for all this. No, about the baby? The man was sweating. He said that this child died. There are all the relevant documents. She stood up. went to the closet, and pulled out the death certificate. "Why do you have it?" Jenny wondered, and John was looking at the paper at that moment. Anna had begged for it to be done as if she had given birth. The baby had to go somewhere. We couldn't even officially give it to an orphanage, so everyone agreed. She took the certificate from the man's hands. Why does it say Nellie and her name is Jenny? The questions were endless. That's what Aubrey decided, so they wrote out the birth certificate under a different name, Maria explained. "Okay, how did the neighbors not notice?" John asked again. "What are you bickering?" Hal and Hal silently folded her hands on her chest. "Woman, it's simple. If even Aunt Leslie didn't tell us anything, then everything was normal," said Jenny. "Okay, I'll talk to her some more." You sort of brushed the girl off. He had a bunch of questions of his own. "So why Jenny?" He fixed his eyes on Maria. "How should I know? Maybe I like the name, or maybe because that was Julienne's mother's name," she shrugged. "It's clear. We need to go home. We can find out more there." He got up from his chair. "We've kept this secret for so many years. Why bother with it now?" Maria followed them to the exit. "I won't say anything to anyone. I just wanted to find out what's going on." He turned to her. "Okay. Good luck." She hugged Jenny. "Thank you for everything." He thanked the woman again. By the time they got outside, it was already night. "I guess I'll go home," Jeannie said. "No," John shook his head. "Work tomorrow." She knew her boss could exempt her from that. "That's okay, we can drive from my place too. We have a big house. There's plenty of room for everyone." He opened the car doors. After that, Leslie was driven home. "You still haven't told me anything." She had already dozed off in the car. "Let's meet tomorrow or the day after. It's late today. We'll talk later." Now the man was very calm and thoughtful. "Okay, Jenny, don't forget, drop by." She looked at her. It was very uncomfortable for the girl to go to John's house, but he was so insistent that she couldn't refuse. When they were at the house, everyone was already asleep. The man showed her which room she could settle down in. Jenny was glad to be able to get some rest. She went and washed her face, and after that she just went to sleep. In the morning she was woken up by the alarm clock. She washed her face again. She looked at her clothes. She realized that she would have to go in the same ones today. Yes, she didn't have many clothes at home, but she changed them every day. "Good morning." She timidly walked out of the room. "Come in, don't be shy," the man called out to her. They were all already gathered around the table. "Thank you." She lowered her head and walked over. "Jenny," John's mother-in-law said to her. "Yes." She looked up. "Come with me." She beckoned her somewhere. "Okay." The girl followed her and thought she was going to start reprimanding her about not coming into the house with strange men or something. "Look, I prepared some clothes for you." She pointed to the clothes that were hanging on the shoulders. "What for?" She was frightened. "Look at you, and these are my daughter's clothes. They'll fit you." Jenny was sure. "Thank you." But Jenny went to change. Afterward, they went to the table together. "Wow." John appreciated that. "Don't embarrass me." The girl blushed. She even looked younger in this outfit. "Okay, we'll go to work now, and then we'll all meet here." He looked at his mother-in-law. "John," she looked up at him. "I said everything," the man said in an iron tone. They drove off. As they passed through security, everyone was already looking at them with great curiosity. Jenny went to mind her own business, and the supervisor his. "Meet me in the reception area in 3 hours," he told her. "Understood." Jenny nodded her head. She was doing her usual business when another cleaner approached her. "Jenny, let's go outside," she called out to her. "I have a lot to do." She didn't feel like talking to anyone. "Let's go." The woman took her under her arm. "What do you want?" She put down everything she had in her hands and followed her. There were already several workers where Jenny was led. "Come on, Jenny, tell me, how did you manage to hook up with the chief?" They began to ask her in a low voice. "You're confused about something. He and I have the same business. Now that everything is cleared up, nothing more will happen." She tried to talk them out of it. "What are you telling us? It's the second day you haven't broken up. Where did you get the new clothes?" They didn't believe a word she said. "Look, I'm going to work. I don't have much time left." She looked at the one who had brought her here. "Ah, I see. Left to work like that, for cover," laughed one of the girls. "What are you?" cried and ran away from them, Jenny. She hadn't even thought about it when she was tailing John. Okay, if that's what they thought of her, then what thoughts did the employees have about the boss himself? Jenny decided to talk to him about it today. She hoped that whatever they started figuring out yesterday would be over. Jenny had pretty much done all the work when the time was up. She went to the reception area again. No one had said anything to her there today, but she didn't go into the office. What's not going in? Without raising her eyes, the girl spoke. Don't. Jenny didn't want to talk to her. At that moment, John came out himself. Oh, you're already here, he saw the girl, and they went out again. John, can I talk to you? She was catching up with him. Sure, what do you want? They were already approaching the car. Wait, she stopped him not to get in because the driver could talk too. What? He didn't understand her gesture. Do you know what they were talking about in the office today? She told him about the gossip that was starting to spread. Does it bother you? He asked. Not really. She was surprised at this reaction of his. Well, much less me. John opened the door for the girl to sit down. They went to the house where Jenny had spent the night tonight. Do you think Jenny will tell you everything? The girl asked. Where would she go? Believed the man. They went into the house. They were already waiting for them there. The table was set. Have a seat, Jenny invited her hostess. Thank you. She was shy again. Everyone, bon appetit, they began their meal, a tense silence hanging over the table. Finally, when it was time for tea, John began to speak. I'm listening to you. He looked at the woman. Are you sure? She replied. Absolutely, he nodded. Why bring up the past? She didn't understand. What do you think happened? John asked. Okay, I'll tell you everything. Forgive me both, she cried. Mom, John and I are probably going to get married. Julian came running home that day. What? She turned to her daughter and looked at her for a long time. You realize he has nothing. He's a beggar. What can he give you? I have it's enough for us, and then he'll earn money. The girl didn't despair. What will he earn? Her mother couldn't accept it. Why do you have such an opinion of him? Julian sat down on a chair and cried. This is not the kind of lot we wished for you. Her mother sat across from her. Why didn't they let you go anywhere then? If you had lived in Moscow now, you would have found a normal man. So no, why should I study? I'll work for my father anyway. She reproached the woman. I see, but my last word, no wedding. The mother stood her ground. I'm expecting a child, Julian said when her mother got up and went to do something. Don't you get it? The woman returned to her seat. You haven't heard or don't know what it is, as if the woman was mocking her. When did you have time? He is a minor who can't do anything and has nothing, resented the mother. There is no turning back, the girl waved her hands. There's always a way out, Jenny was sure. No, unbuttoned Julian's cloak, the time limit was already imposing. Does he know? Mom approached her daughter. I wanted to say when the wedding would have been decided. Juliana was so pleased now. She had put her parents on the spot in a way. Okay, you're going off to your grandmother's house so no one can see or tell. It was obvious that Jenny wasn't kidding. No, Julian didn't know what she should do now. Eventually, the wife told her husband that her daughter hadn't had a vacation in a while. She needed to go visit her grandmother. The father did not resist, and Juliana went to her grandmother, who was her mom's mom. She lived in the country. They had tried to move her from there many times, but she didn't want to leave the land. Mom, hi. Jenny walked into the house. Oh, what are the odds? You're always busy, the woman greeted them. Listen, her daughter told her everything. At least she'll stay like this. Her grandmother was against getting rid of the child. And when the mother left, it was incomprehensible. Why hide the girl if the pregnancy was still preserved? But Juliana lived in the village until the birth. Naturally, during this time she did not meet John. Come on, let's go. Jenny came into the house. Where to? Julian didn't understand. Where to? You have a deadline to meet. The woman hurried her. They packed their things, got in the car, drove off. When they were home, the father was not there. The mother gave her daughter a very wide dress. Why? Julian took it in her hands. Put it on so the father's belly won't notice. Jenny prayed that the labor would start faster, and preferably in the afternoon while Oliver was at work. Oliver came in from work. His daughter was sitting in the kitchen. She looked ridiculous. What's that look? Did Grandma fatten her up? Laughed the father at his daughter. Yep, she finished her meal and went to her room. Julian wondered what her mother would do after she gave birth, but hesitated to ask. In the morning, when her father left, the girl went out to eat breakfast. All day long she did nothing, suffering from idleness. The hardest thing was this parting with the young man. But the girl believed that now their baby would be born and everything would be fine. She lay on the bed. It was late, thirsty. Juliana went to the kitchen, and just as she stood up, something so stabbed her lower abdomen that she almost fell down. "Mom!" Juliana yelled. "What?" She came running. "I'm going into labor," kneeling and holding her stomach. How? Because the term is still a few weeks away, the mother took the girl's hand, helped her up. "I don't know. It's not like I have any control over it," Julian grumbled. Presently, Jenny left the room. Her father was gone. She made a phone call somewhere, and then she threw a coat over her daughter, and they went to the car. They arrived at the hospital late. They were immediately led into the delivery room. Juliana was already screaming. The pain was incredible. But it was the flowers. When it started for real, then the girl thought she would die from it. Not only that labor began early, but also the baby was with an encirclement. "It's not good," the doctor said. "What can be done?" Jeannie was there. "Nothing, it's fate." The doctor said, "If you're lucky, you'll be fine." It was very difficult and painful. They had to make several incisions to make it work. By the end, Julian was almost unconscious. She didn't remember or understand much. Finally, it was over. "I have to tell you sadly, the baby is dead." The doctor approached Jenny. "Well, good," she said then. It was not for nothing that she had kept her daughter hidden from the gossip. Mother and daughter spent the next day in the hospital. "Where's my baby?" Julian asked when she regained consciousness. "He's gone," the nurse who cleaned the place told her. "Close the door," the girl asked. "Okay," did as asked. "Is it true?" Julian realized that her mother could be setting all this up. Of course, how can you lie about something like that? The nurse recoiled from her. "If it really is true, here, take this. Bury it with the child." She handed her the very locket. "It will be done." The woman nodded her head. She left the room and Juliana cried loudly. Her mother came running to the crying. She tried to comfort her little girl. "Everything will be all right. You will give birth to many more babies," Jeannie told her. "She won't." At this point, the doctor came in to say it would be okay to go home in the morning. "What do you mean she won't?" The mother turned to the man. Now, he didn't look her in the eye. "Mom," she looked at the woman. "My darling," she hugged her daughter. "The child had to be buried," the orderly was asked to do. "Wait, let's have a look at him," the cleaning lady told her. "What are you doing? We need to show the doctors." She was scared. "Nothing terrible will happen if we take one look," she said. They went into the room, unwrapped the package. There was a little girl lying there. God, such a little girl, why? Bent over her Anna, who cleaned the place. "That's it, come on," hurried her Maria, who was a nurse. "Wait, she's breathing," her friend told her. "No way," she leaned over to the girl. "Oh my God, she's alive." Anna screamed. They grabbed the baby and carried her to the doctors, but not for what they wanted to do with her before. "Please look, the baby is breathing," the women shouted at each other. Indeed, the little one was alive, but very weak. She was placed in a special room under a lamp. They had to tell the mother the happy news. "Where are you going?" "She's asleep." Jenny sat next to the door. "We have very good news." Maria's hands were shaking. "What news?" The woman got up from her chair. "Your baby is alive," whispered the nurse, so as not to jinx it. "What do you mean?" the doctor said. The mother was stunned. Just a minute ago, everything was fine. She was thinking where she would send her daughter for rehabilitation, and now. "Yes, but she's alive, breathing," Maria rejoiced. "Okay, let's go," took Jenny aside the woman. "What are you doing?" She made big eyes. "Here, take this, say that the child died, and give it to the others." She gave the money to the woman. "I can't do that." Maria started to resist, but the woman threatened her with dismissal and something else. Now the gynecologist, the nurse, and the cleaning lady knew about the terrible secret. What to do was unclear. "I'll take the baby," Anna said then. "Look what she has." Maria pulled a locket out of her pocket. "Well, maybe by this thing someone will find her someday." Anna took it and put it in her pocket. And then she was moved to another town for a while. She had a real birth certificate. It turned out that Anna had given birth to this baby herself. No one would ever guess otherwise. "Jenny, how could you?" Oliver jumped up from his seat and immediately grabbed his heart. "What, I was young and stupid," she cried. "Well, why did you consult me?" He stood, wrinkling his nose and looking for a pill. Or with me, John wanted to cry too, but couldn't. I'm sorry, I didn't know it would be like this. My mother-in-law wiped her tears with a handkerchief. Okay, and then when we got married and everything was going well, why didn't we look for a girl? John asked. Look, maybe it wasn't like that at all, Jenny soothed. How was it? The men and the girl looked at her. Our girl is really dead, and the other one that some beggar gave birth to was going to be slipped to us. She looked at Jenny with a different look than she had this morning. What are you talking about? Oliver finally took the pill. He felt much better now. What I think is what I say. It's hard for me too. Don't you see? Think of all the things I've lived with all my life. She tried to justify herself in various ways. Okay, I have one thing to do. He took Jenny's hand and dragged her towards the exit. Where are we going? She was practically running. Let's go to the clinic. John had it all mapped out in his head. Now they were on their way to get a paternity test. Do you seriously think I'm your daughter? She looked at him. Why not? If all these stories are true, anything is possible. Can you imagine? John was all tense as a spring again. They had come to the clinic, taken all the tests. Now all that was left to do was wait. That's it. I'm going home now, she said afterwards. No, you're not going anywhere. He held her hand. Do you want me to live with your father-in-law and mother-in-law? She stood and smiled. If everything checks out, they'll be your grandparents. He pulled her towards the car. Okay, just until the results are in it, she agreed. Every day now, John drove to work with Jenny every day. Everyone was already talking openly about their relationship. Jenny, when's the wedding? A co-worker asked her. Leave everyone alone, she replied and paid no attention to anyone. The good. She put her hands out in front of her. And how is he in bed? Another one came up. What are you talking about? Jeannie couldn't understand. Why are you still working here? A third one came up. That was it. She went to the supervisor's office. I want to quit, she told him. Why? He was surprised, and then he thought of something else. Because I'm fed up with everyone here. That we have a relationship. She sat down on a chair and started crying. You could write a statement and don't come again, he told her. Okay. Thank you. She took a sheet and a pen and was about to start writing when she stopped. What are you doing? He watched her. I was thinking, if I leave here, what am I going to do at your house then? She looked up at John. Then, I'm letting you go on vacation. He found a way out of it. Jeannie, come out, Jeannie called her one day. Yes, what did you want? Though she could see that the woman's attitude towards her had changed, she didn't want to badmouth her. Come on, she led her into the kitchen, sat her down on a chair, poured tea for herself and the girl, and then pulled out a huge photo album. What's this? Jenny had never seen one of these before. Now, open the one in the first page. There was a girl who looked a lot like Jenny. If I didn't know any better, I'd say it was me. She looked at the other pictures too. Of course, there's no need for any tests. I can see that you're Jenny's daughter. I just need to be sure if it's Jonah, the woman said curtly. I see. The girl didn't ask any more questions. They sat for a long time, looking at the pictures. Jenny told who and what was depicted there. This is our wedding. She stroked a picture of a young girl and a boy. You love him, don't you? Looked that there was warmth in the woman's eyes. Can you imagine? So many years have passed and I still remember everything. It seemed that the woman was about to cry. Let's keep going, Jenny asked as they turned to the next page. Look, there was John and Julianne's wedding. They were very young too. Is that my mom? Pointed Jenny at the girl. Yes. Now the woman was crying because she missed her Julianne so much. Beautiful, she stroked the picture. Yes. Jenny stopped talking. What's wrong with you? The girl turned to her. I'm sorry, baby, the woman hugged her. It's okay, I was fine too. I lived happily until I was 10. Jenny lowered her eyes. It's going to be okay now. As long as I'm alive, I won't leave you. They sat like that, hugging each other. In the evening, when John came home, he said he had gotten a call from the clinic. The tests were ready. Well, shall we take a look? He shook the envelope. He wanted to open it so badly on the way home, but he waited until he got home. Now, we have to wait for Oliver, Jeannie said. Okay, the man was already tearing the envelope. I'm on my way down. He walked down the stairs. When the envelope was opened, John didn't read anything. His eyes immediately dropped to the bottom of the page. The man's face stretched. He couldn't look away. What is it? The others couldn't wait. The fact that I'm her father, He pointed at Jenny. 99 and 9, he cried. Come on, his father-in-law hugged him. I can't believe it. I've dreamed of having kids all my life, and here we are. Dreams come true. He couldn't calm down. It's okay. They set the table for dinner. John, will you never forgive me? The mother-in-law asked her son-in-law. Already forgiven, and to be honest, he was never angry. He came over and hugged her. What should I do now? Jenny asked modestly. Okay, I realize it's unfamiliar, but get used to calling me Dad and their grandparents, John mumbled. I'll try, smiled Jenny. She didn't know how everything in her life was about to change. Son, I want you to fire Jenny, said Oliver suddenly. Suddenly what? John didn't understand him. My granddaughter can't work as a janitor, said the grandfather. Well, I understand you, but she can't do anything else, a man said. We'll teach her, Oliver was sure of it. It's understood, they agreed. Doesn't anyone want to ask me? Jenny interjected. Tell her father suggested. I don't want to change anything. I'm fine with everything. She stood up and walked around the table, and I don't want to just sit here. I'll help. Okay, it'll be fine, laughed Grandma. The next day, John and Jenny drove to work together again. This was no longer a surprise to anyone, but the gossip still persisted. Dear employees, please gather everyone in the conference room, John said into the loudspeaker. When everyone was gathered there, the person in charge came on stage. He stood at the microphone and waited for everyone to be quiet. Finally, the crowd quieted down. Now he's going to introduce Jenny to us as his wife, they whispered in the back rows. Dear colleagues, the director began, I would like to introduce Jenny to you. At that moment, he extended his hand and called her to him. Well, what did I say? Came a whisper still there. Quiet, you. Shushed the woman, everyone. Hello, came the girl on stage. A lot of people know her. She's a very good worker. Always and everything is done on time. I think a promotion is waiting for her soon. He put one arm around Jenny's shoulder. Don't, I'm embarrassed, she asked. No, so there won't be any rumors and gossip. I have to announce it to everyone. Everyone in the hall seemed to freeze. Okay, she nodded. Jenny is my daughter, he said each word separately. What? Everyone exhaled. Yes, I only found that out a short while ago, but now I'm going to catch up on what I missed. The man smiled full on. From all sides began to say something. Some congratulated, others said something judgmental. When everyone had already been dismissed, Jack approached John. Congratulations, he shook his hand. Did you think when you didn't want to hire Jenny that she was your daughter? You know, I'll remember you in a good word for a long time to come, John thanked his friend. Sincere congratulations, he hugged Jenny. Thank you, she smiled. Okay, we need to go to your place and gather all the important things there. Spoke out loud what needed to be done today, John said. I'm still uncomfortable, Jenny slouched her gaze. Look, it's uncomfortable to sleep on the ceiling, and now it's okay. Because of one word from some man, you've endured hardships for so many years. It should be different now. They walked out of the gate and up to the car. John opened the door for Jenny. She got into the car. Still, the girl was uncomfortable with the way things had turned out so far. Take me to Aunt Leslie's, she asked the man. Okay, let's go. Just promise me you'll come home from her. He took her at her word. Yes, I promise I'll come back. She knew the woman didn't know anything after they had parted ways. Jenny arrived at the entranceway that was already familiar to her. She walked in and knocked on the door. Leslie was very happy to see her. She let the girl inside, put the kettle on as usual, took out cups and various treats. I knew you would come today. I made cookies, the woman told her. I could not come since we've already done everything together. I should tell you everything, Jenny answered her. And how did your story end? Leslie was interested. You have no idea. It turned out that John is my father, said the girl. Wow, Leslie sat down on a chair. She poured tea into cups and pushed one to Jenny. Yeah, we were all in shock. The girl shook her head. What about now? The woman asked her. They call me to live with them, and I'm so uncomfortable that I can't even talk about it, Jenny admitted. Come on, while you have the opportunity, take everything from life, said her former neighbor. I can't do that, take advantage of people. The girl looked at her surprised. What to use? Once they just threw you out of their lives. And now, when your father wants to help you, you have to agree with him. Leslie realized that except for her, no one else will advise the girl anything. I'll certainly try, she promised, shrugged, and averted her eyes from Jenny. They sat and talked for a long time, and then Jenny's phone rang. It was John. "Are you guys still sitting around?" he asked her. "Why, is something wrong?" She was scared. "No, nothing. I just came to pick you up, and I'm standing in the driveway now," he answered his daughter. "Okay, I'll be right out," she answered him and started to get ready. "Jenny, you come see me again," Leslie hugged her in the hallway. "I will," she told her and walked out of the apartment. "What? You didn't believe that I would come to you?" "Got in the car, girl. Knowing your character, you need to double-check 100 times," John told her. "Let's go." She had pretty much resigned herself to the idea that he was going to do everything for her now. At home, Jenny and Oliver were waiting for them. They had set the table again, and now they all sat down to dinner together. "Jenny, how happy we are to have you," her grandmother was telling her. "Yes," the girl shook her head. "Now we need to get you our last name. Grandfather really wanted him to have grandchildren." "Yes, paternity is proven, so there should be no difficulties," agreed with him son-in-law. "You decided everything for me," Jenny smiled and said sadly. "Let me take care of you," her father pleaded. In the morning they went to the beauty parlor, then shopping. When the girl looked at herself in the mirror, "Eden, hello." They shook hands. "Who is this, your new wife?" He looked at Jenny. "You won't believe it, daughter," laughed the man back. "Wow, that's how old you became a father," was Eden genuinely surprised. "Okay, look how uncomfortable she is listening to all this. Come on, I better introduce you to." He led him over to his daughter. "Jenny, this is my good friend and partner, Eden," he introduced the young man. "Nice to meet you." He kissed her hand. Really, the girl was not at all comfortable. "Will you have lunch with us?" John turned to him. "With pleasure," he winked at Jenny. "Then let's go to the restaurant," John decided. They packed up and went to the closest restaurant that was to the place. The man walked and looked at the young couple. He saw that Eden liked his daughter and thought that if they had a relationship, it would be all right, and he would help them. When they entered the building and sat down at a table, John decided to order himself. He ordered champagne and fruit. "This is quite a meal," Eden smiled. "What's not to your liking?" "You can order the rest yourself," John laughed back. When the waiter uncorked the bottle and poured the sparkling wine into glasses, the man proposed a toast. He said he was expecting Eden at his house anytime. Jenny blushed at this point. They were on their way home when it was late evening. "So, did you like the young man?" the father asked his daughter. "Did you do it on purpose?" she told him. "You what? If I did it on purpose, it would definitely not be Eden," the father was sure. "Who would it be?" She was ashamed, but she asked. "I don't know, some Jack." John was laughing now. They got home. Jenny retired to her room. She never even thought that she would soon have a young man and they would have some sort of relationship. Eden started calling her daily. He was suggesting to meet and also to date at all. "Grandma, do you think I should do it or not?" she asked Jenny one day. "Oh, child, it's up to you to decide." The woman was confused. "Well, I like Eden very much, and if you don't mind, he's coming to dinner tonight," Jenny said. "I already told you that this young man can come to us any time of the day or night," her father answered her. In the evening, Eden came and they had a very nice dinner. And in the morning, Jenny asked her father to take her to her mother's grave. "Of course, how could I deny you that?" he told her. Eden said he would go with them. And now they stood in the cemetery, a young woman looking at them from a photograph and smiling. "There's Julianne, our daughter," John said, a tear sliding down his cheek.